Chapter 2016. That's right. Qi Xiang replied, even though he was only a late overgod, he did not fear the mid-divine king at all. Qi Xiang's identity had been confirmed. The three-eyed demon king's gaze towards Qi Xiang was immediately filled with deep fear. The three-eyed demon king had stayed in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire for a period of time, so he had some understanding of the peak clans and sects in the Blood Sun Empire. The Qi family was one of the peak clans in the Blood Sun Empire. Even the imperial family of the Blood Sun Empire had to be courteous to them. To the three-eyed demon king, the disciples of these large clans were existences that he could not afford to provoke. Even though he had already left the southern region and the Cloud Plain, his fear towards these large clans did not decrease at all. This was because he understood that once he offended these large clans, they could easily cross plains to hunt him down, even if he fled the Cloud Plain. Most importantly, Qi Xiang had the Divine King by his side. Any aristocratic family's young master that could make a divine king powerhouse protect. Their statuses were definitely extraordinary. Jianqin slowly approached the three-eyed demon king. His presence skyrocketed as he radiated with powerful battle intent. He said, "Sir, it's best if you return the item to the girl. Otherwise, it'll be difficult for this matter to end peacefully. We might just meet in the arena of life and death." Jianqin's presence was pressing as he directly crushed towards the three-eyed demon king. Right now he felt a vague desire. He wanted to find a powerful opponent to challenge and test his current strength. At the same time, he wanted to test the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The three-eyed demon king immediately became furious when he heard Jianqin's undisguised threat. Killing intent surged in his eyes. Even though he had heard of Jianqin's fame and how he could kill the Divine King as an overgod, he was only an early Divine King. The three-eyed demon king did not fear him at all. The difference between early Divine King and mid-Divine King was extremely great. It could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. If Jianqin was an early Divine King, the three-eyed demon king believed that Jianqin could challenge a mid-Divine King. However, Jianqin was still an overgod. The three-eyed demon king stared at Jianqin viciously with killing intent. Just when he was about to agree to Jianqin's challenge, Qi Xiang's voice rang out. "Brother Jianqin's matters are my matters. Three-eyed demon king, if you don't follow Brother Jianqin's words, I can only challenge you in the arena of life." Qi Xiang's words were like a bucket of cold water that poured over the three-eyed demon king's head. It chilled him from head to toe. He did not take Qi Xiang's strength seriously, but there were no rules in the arena of life and death. He was certain that once Qi Xiang really did enter the arena of life and death, the experts of the Qi family would definitely follow him. "I won't pursue the matter today for young Master Qi's sake." The three-eyed demon king knew that he could not keep the jade pendant anymore. He glared at Jianqin viciously before tossing the jade pendant back to the girl reluctantly. He left with a sunken face. The girl became especially excited after recovering the pendant. She clenched the pendant tightly in her hands as she thanked Jianqin gratefully. The older woman walked over as well. She clasped her fist at Jianqin and said gratefully, "I am Zun, and this is my younger sister, Xiaoman. Thank you for retrieving the jade pendant for my younger sister, Jianqin." Boom! Just when Jianqin was about to return the greeting, a deafening rumble suddenly rang out. The entire spatial battleship shook violently, and the spatial battleship seemed to come to a halt at that moment. The powerful inertia caused everyone on the deck to be thrown towards the side of the ship uncontrollably. Even experts like the Divine King struggled to stop themselves from moving so quickly. Bang! 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 Immediately, a string of heavy thuds rang out. Everyone on the deck was thrown towards the side of the ship or the protective formations around the spatial battleship. Many people vomited blood. The force of the collision was just too great. Even overgods struggled to prevent themselves from becoming injured. As for those below over God, quite a few of them were directly slain, their souls directly dispersed. Jianqin, Kea, and Master Chanlong were unable to avoid it either. The three of them collided with the side of the ship even faster than a meteor. In that critical moment, Master Chanlong directly used the azure disc to protect himself, while Kea was surrounded by powerful laws of destruction. As for Jianqin, he had filled his entire body with chaotic force in a single instance. He had unleashed the defenses of the chaotic body. However, even with that being the case, Jianqin was still dazed from the collision. He saw stars as he felt the world spin around him. The force of the collision was just too great. The spatial battleship had suddenly come to a halt at such a high speed, so the inertia was unimaginable. It was definitely faster than a meteor. The deck was immediately filled with a heavy smell of blood. Many people died on the spot. Their bodies were reduced to pieces as blood dyed the deck red. Jianqin recovered very soon. He looked over and saw that Kea and Chanlong were fine. They were just slightly shaken up like him, so he could not help but stop worrying. Afterwards, he looked around and discovered that a few Divine King experts had climbed up from the ground in horrible shapes. As for the overgods, many of them were injured to varying degrees. However, Qi Xiang possessed a supreme quality defensive treasure, so he remained unscathed. Ziyun was uninjured as well. Her sister, Xiaoman, had been caught by Ziyun as soon as the collision happened. As a result, Xiaoman was not injured at all. She had only fainted from the impact. What happened? What's going on? What's wrong with the spatial battleship? As more and more people returned to their senses, the deck immediately fell into an uproar. However, in the next moment, three extremely terrifying presences radiated from the spatial battleship. The presences passed through the protective formations of the spatial battleship and directly permeated the surrounding space, causing it to ripple like water. Three old men appeared silently above the deck of the spatial battleship. They all raised their heads to look at the sky sternly. The three old men were the three elders that Jianqin had seen on the top floor of the spatial battleship. Space beasts are attacking. Everyone be alert, Hong Mo said sternly from the center of the three old men. His old but powerful voice directly passed through all the formations on the spatial battleship, reverberating through every inch of the spatial battleship. Space beasts. Jianqin was stunned. He suddenly looked at the sky, and with that glance his eyes suddenly narrowed. A colossal, black shadow hovered above the spatial battleship. It was like a vast, dark cloud above everyone, blotting out the light of the sun, moon, and stars. As it was black, it was extremely similar to outer space. As a result, it was difficult to discover its existence unless one looked closely. What kind of space beast is this? It's so huge. Jianqin was deeply shocked. The spatial battleship was several tens of thousand meters long, which was already large enough in his eyes. But compared to the space beast hovering above, it was like an ant compared to an elephant. The space beast's body really was as large as a planet. At the same time, the white-haired, extremely old woman slowly opened her eyes in a high-class cabin of the spatial battleship. Undisguised exhaustion filled her face as she gently sighed. I never thought we'd run into a nebula beast emperor. We can't keep the spatial battleship. Sigh, after running for so many years, I wonder if we can still escape this time. Chapter 2017. The deck of the spatial battleship was filled with people very soon. The cultivators who were originally in the various cabins of the spatial battleship all rushed to the deck as quickly as they could, completely crowding the huge square. Many of these people had already suffered injuries of varying degrees. Clearly, even though they were in the cabins, the sudden halt of the spatial battleship caused many of them to collide with the spatial battleship due to inertia. At this moment, even though the deck was filled with people, it was deathly silent. Everyone stared at the sky, deeply stunned by the planet-sized spatial beast that hovered above the spatial battleship. Jianqin was extremely stern as well. He stared at the huge spatial beast sternly as his heart sank. Although he was unable to sense the exact strength of the spatial beast due to the protective formations of the spatial battleship, he still felt suffocated. It's actually a nebula beast, Emperor. We're in trouble now. Among the 3 elders on the spatial battleship, He said sternly. Hong Mo's face sank as well. He immediately ordered, "Activate all the defensive formations and direct all the energy from the killing formations to the kinetic formations. Open the divine crystal storage of the spatial battleship and move all the stored divine crystals to the center of the kinetic formations. Then, the spatial battleship will charge over as fast as it can." "Yes, sir." With that, a divine king in the uniform of a law enforcer below replied politely. He immediately turned around and entered the cabins. In just a few seconds, a tremendous pulse of energy appeared from the spatial battleship. All the defensive formations on the spatial battleship had been activated, pushing its defenses to the limit. The defensive formations on the spatial battleship were extremely powerful, let alone infinite primes. Even if chaotic primes personally took action, the spatial battleship would be able to block several attacks with its defensive formations. Although the spatial battleship had gained great defenses, it consumed its energy extremely quickly as well. Just as the defensive array formation was activated to the maximum, the propulsion array formation of the spaceship was also activated to the maximum. Immediately, a powerful push appeared, causing many people on the deck to stagger. The spatial battleship had already shot off as a streak of light. Activate the spirit guiding formation. Everyone on the ship, immediately channel your origin energy into the deck. Whether we can escape or not will depend on this. Hong Mo's voice rang out again. This time, he was clearly speaking to everyone on the ship. As he spoke, a huge array appeared on the deck beneath everyone's feet. This was the spirit guiding formation set up on the Void battleship. It could guide all energy into any formation. Everyone knew that they were facing a true crisis of life and death. In order to protect their lives, no one hesitated at all. They poured all of their origin energy into the formation without holding back. All of this origin energy was channeled into the driving formation of the battleship. With the support of this energy, the battleship's speed suddenly skyrocketed. In just a moment, it had left the space beasts floating above the battleship, far behind. Many people on the ship immediately let out a sigh of relief when they saw this. Joy filled their faces. However, the expressions on their faces quickly froze as they stared blankly at the sky above them. The spatial battleship had already pushed its speed to the limit. It was even faster than before, faster than a streak of light. However, the Nebula Beast Emperor was even faster. In less than 2 seconds, it had caught up to them from behind. Its colossal, pitch-black body appeared above the battleship once again. A huge claw the size of a mountain suddenly extended from above, ripping through space and striking the spatial battleship with a tremendous and terrifying pressure. With a great boom, the spatial battleship was blown far away by the Nebula Beast Emperor's claw like a fallen leaf. Everyone on the deck slammed into one another in horrible shape. Even someone as powerful as the Divine King was unable to stabilize himself. In the blink of an eye, only 2 people remained standing on the deck aside from the 3 elders. One of them was the old woman from the gathering, while the other was the young man in embroidered robes. However, the 2 of them were extremely stern as well. The Nebula Beast Emperor has already reached early chaotic prime. "We can't escape with the battleship," said the old woman. Her voice was weak and filled with exhaustion. As the old woman said that, the spatial battleship shook violently once again. The outermost formation had already been ripped open, destroyed by the Nebula Beast Emperor. Although the spatial battleship possessed countless defensive formations, they all intertwined and overlapped with one another, forming the 3 most powerful formations in the end. As for the 3 strongest formations, one of them had already been broken, leaving only 2. The young man in embroidered robes was extremely stern as well. He stared at the Nebula Beast Emperor and said sternly, "The defensive formations on the battleship won't be able to last for very long against chaotic primes. Elders, let's open the formations and flee." To no surprise, the young man was also a primordial realm expert. "Hong Mo, what do we do?" The two other elders on the spatial battleship looked at Hong Mo. Some sharpness gradually appeared in Hong Mo's eyes as powerful battle intent rose up from him. He said, "Although the Nebula Beast Emperor has reached chaotic prime, it seems like it has only broken through recently from its presence. Old man, go deal with it. If you can keep it busy, immediately take the battleship away from here." "Hong Mo, that's too dangerous." The two other elders still wanted to persuade him, but Hong Mo had already vanished. In the next moment, the power of powerful primordial realm laws descended. The entire space shook violently as powerful spatial energy pulsed. Clearly, Hong Mo had already begun fighting the Nebula Beast Emperor. Just when the two elders on the battleship were about to give the order to leave, the battleship suddenly shook violently. The Nebula Beast King that was fighting the red demons suddenly extended a mountainous claw and grabbed the spatial battleship. Crack! The second defensive formation on the spatial battleship shattered. "Oh no!" The expressions of the two elders on the battleship changed drastically. "This Nebula Beast Emperor is too strong. We won't be able to escape. Hurry up and give me some healing pills. Once I've recovered, I'll fight against the Nebula Beast Emperor with you all. That way we might still have a chance of survival," said the old woman. "Here." At this moment, the two elders no longer cared about the value of the healing pills. They each took out a god-tier healing pill and tossed it to the old woman. The old woman quickly checked the two divine healing pills and swallowed them as fast as she could. Chapter 2018. The attack from the Nebula Beast Emperor was extremely powerful. The final line of defense of the spatial battleship immediately shattered with a great rumble. Without the protection of the formation, the spatial battleship was unable to block the powerful attack from the Nebula Beast Emperor with its toughness alone. Cracks rapidly spread across the spatial battleship. Although there were still powerful killing formations on the spatial battleship, they posed no threat to the Nebula Beast Emperor at all. "Let's go!" As soon as the formation shattered, Jianqin called out. He pulled Kea and Chanlong with him and shot off into outer space like an arrow. In Jianqin's eyes, the spatial battleship that was already extremely powerful clearly could not be kept. If they remained on the ship, they would become even more of a target and be more easily threatened. The moment Jianqin left the spatial battleship, the people gathered on the deck clearly understood the current situation as well. Many of them charged off into outer space in all directions. Many of them paid a great price to use various movement techniques to escape as quickly as possible, bearing the consequences of being heavily injured. Jianqin scanned through the crowd with the senses of his soul and found the girl called Xiao Man. She was still unconscious right now, held by her sister Ziyun. The girl called Xiao Man made Jianqin think of Xiaoling. He seemed to see Xiaoling's shadow on Xiao Man, so Jianqin could not just watch Xiao Man die here. However, just when Jianqin wanted to save Xiao Man and Ziyun, a simple talisman suddenly appeared in Ziyun's hand. She formed a seal, and the talisman immediately emitted a powerful energy that enveloped Ziyun and Xiao Man. An extremely terrifying power of space revolved around the two of them. A cosmic movement talisman. Hong Mo immediately cried out when he sensed the power of space in his battle against the Nebula Beast Emperor. The eyes of the other two elders on the spatial battleship, the old woman, and the young man in embroidered robes all narrowed. A cosmic movement talisman was extremely precious. It could move people extremely far away, allowing them to teleport between planes. It was a supreme treasure for fleeing. Even they did not possess one. The young man in embroidered robes immediately beamed. He arrived before Ziyun with a single step and directly reached towards Ziyun with his hand. However, he was still a step too late. The powerful power of space from the movement talisman was not something the young man could stop. With a flash of white light, Ziyun vanished from the spatial battleship, with Xiaoman Jianqin was stunned when he witnessed this. He glanced at where Ziyun had vanished from deeply before turning around and charging into outer space. He fled into the distance with Qianlong and Kea. At this moment, a great beast's roar rang out from behind. It shook up the surroundings, and the terrifying sound reverberated in space as visible sound waves. As the beastly roars rang out, countless auras suddenly appeared in the void, spreading out with a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Jianqin, Kea, and Qianlong subconsciously looked back as they fled. Their eyes immediately narrowed, and their faces changed drastically. At such a close distance, they could see the full appearance of the Nebula Beast Emperor that had attacked the spatial battleship. To no surprise, it was a huge, pitch-black beast the size of a planet. It seemed like a lizard, except it had 8 legs. It was currently engaged in a battle with the 5 Primordial Realm experts on the spatial battleship. However, there were countless Nebula Beasts of various strengths lying on the Nebula Beast Emperor's back. At this moment, the countless Nebula Beasts flew out from the Nebula Beast Emperor's back. Their eyes were blood red as they chased after the cultivators in all directions. There were extremely many Nebula Beasts, no less than 1 million of them. With a single glance, they were innumerable, as dense as a swarm of locusts. Hurry up and run! Facing the pursuit of so many Nebula Beasts, many people's faces turned pale. They let out panic screams and fled wildly. Even Jianqin, Kea, and Qianlong fled into the distance as quickly as they could. However, these Nebula Beasts were originally space beasts. They lived in outer space, so they were like fish in water here. Whether it was in terms of speed or battle prowess, they were greater than regular cultivators. Moreover, there were quite a few existences on par with the Divine King among them. As a result, in just a few seconds, many cultivators had been stopped by the Nebula Beasts. Under the intense battle, blood immediately dyed outer space red. Even Jianqin, Qianlong, and Kea were caught by 4 Nebula Beasts on par with the Divine King. With their escape obstructed, the 2 sides engaged in an intense battle before being surrounded by even more Nebula Beasts that rushed over from behind. Dalio Sword. Tai Sword Technique. Jianqin's presence surged as he struck out with his full strength. He kept 2 Nebula Beasts on par with the Divine King busy by himself and forced them back with his sword technique. Afterwards, he sent a strand of sword chi towards the Nebula Beasts that surrounded them. Spurt, 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 spurt. Wherever the sword chi passed by, all the Nebula Beasts would be pierced or sliced in half. Just a single strand of sword chi had killed over a dozen Nebula Beasts. Just the Nebula Beasts on the level of over-gods numbered several. Kea struck out without holding back as well. The laws of destruction and the laws of fire revolved around him as his presence surged. He kept the other 2 Divine King Nebula Beasts busy as he charged out as hard as he could. Although Jianqin's strength had increased drastically after 3 years of comprehension, Kea's strength was still no weaker than Jianqin's. Master Qianlong wore a high-quality saint artifact armor. The azure disc in his hand had expanded to 10 meters in size and hovered above his head. Complicated and profound inscriptions flickered as his hands formed seals. He constantly tossed out formation banners as he cast down formations as quickly as he could. A huge python, conjured from formation banners, stood beside him. Under the control of the trapped soul, it slaughtered the Nebula Beasts in the surroundings. Old man Qianlong, hurry up with the formation. There are more and more Nebula Beasts. The trapped soul bellowed out. Even though it could also display the strength of a late over-god through the python conjured from the formation banners, it struggled to fend off so many Nebula Beasts at the same time. After all, there were many over-gods among the Nebula Beasts. There were even late over-gods. If it were not for the extraordinary defenses of the python conjured from the formation banners, it probably would not have been able to last until now. In the vast outer space, the spatial battleship had already shattered into countless fragments. The cultivators who had escaped from the battleship died one after another, causing the space to be littered with corpses. Boom! A violent rumble rang out nearby. A divine king who had fled from the battleship was heavily injured from the attacks of 3 nebula beasts that were no weaker than him. He was forced to blow up his origin energy. Terrifying pulses of energy ripped through space, creating a spatial crack. The 3 divine king nebula beasts were blown away as well. A divine king nebula beast had died soon after the battle began. Jianqin became extremely stern. He discovered that even though he and Kea had kept the 4 early divine king nebula beasts busy and killed a large number of divine king nebula beasts, the number of nebula beasts surrounding them did not decrease at all. Instead, it increased. Chapter 2019. The 2 strands of profound sword Qi moved extremely quickly. They crossed through space and time, arriving before the foreheads of the 2 nebula beasts the moment they shot out. Spurt! Spurt! The 2 divine king nebula beasts were unable to react at all. The 2 strands of profound sword Qi pierced their huge heads like a hot knife through butter. Immediately, the powerful auras from the 2 nebula beasts rapidly weakened. Their eyes, which had been filled with vicious light, became hollow. Their vitality had been completely drained. After shooting out the 2 strands of profound sword Qi, the power of Jianqin's soul immediately decreased by half as well. Fortunately, his soul had reached the level of the divine king, so it was much more powerful than before. Shooting out 2 strands of profound sword Qi at once was unable to completely drain the power of his soul. Jianqin's eyes lit up as he stared at the 2 lifeless nebula beasts. He discovered that the power of his profound sword Qi had increased by quite a lot after his soul had reached the level of the divine king. Otherwise, he would only have used up a third of the power of his soul if he had used 2 strands of profound sword Qi at once. However, in reality, he had used up half of it. The excess was used to strengthen the profound sword Qi. Jianqin did not stop there. He used the sword Qi to chop the heads of the 2 nebula beasts to pieces and removed 2 fist-sized monster cores. At the same time, he formed a seal with his right hand and sent out a strand of Daluo sword Qi towards one of the divine king nebula beasts that Kea was fighting. The nebula beast was fighting against Kea in an extremely intense battle with another nebula beast of the same strength. Their colossal bodies were covered in wounds. Many places had been scorched by Kea's laws of fire, and the power of the laws of destruction pulsed in their wounds. Clearly, they were heavily injured. Now that Jianqin had joined the battle, the injured nebula beast became even less of an opponent. With a flash of dazzling, golden sword, Qi chopped off the head of one of the nebula beasts effortlessly. At the same time, the 4th divine king nebula beast was struck in the head by Kea. The slender, white hand possessed unbelievable power. The power of the laws of destruction surged, directly shattering the nebula beast's head. In the blink of an eye, Jianqin and Kea had slain all 4 divine king beasts. Jianqin and Kea did not hesitate at all. They called out to Master Qianlong and immediately charged. Jianqin and Kea did not hold back at all. The laws of destruction, the laws of fire, and the laws of the sword crisscrossed in the air, mercilessly harvesting the nebula beasts that were only over-gods at best and deities at worst. With their battle prowess that was no weaker than the divine kings, killing the nebula beasts was naturally effortless. Everywhere they passed by, the corpses of the nebula beasts would be left behind. Blood had already dyed the outer space red. However, Jianqin, Kea, and Qianlong did not relax at all. Instead, they became even more stern. This was because they could see that they had already been surrounded by a large number of nebula beasts. Countless nebula beasts had formed a huge sphere, sealing off the surroundings and constantly attacking them from all directions. No matter how many nebula beasts the three of them killed, they remained in the center of the sphere. It was difficult for them to charge out. As time went on, more and more cultivators who had escaped from the battleship died, so more and more nebula beasts charged towards the cultivators who were still alive on the battlefield. As a result, even though Jianqin, Qianlong, and Qianlong had already killed many nebula beasts of varying strength, the number of nebula beasts that surrounded them did not decrease. Instead, it constantly increased. Jianqin did not even have the time to collect the monster cores of the over-god nebula beasts they had killed. All he could do was watch as the corpses of the over-god nebula beasts floated in space silently. Suddenly, a few great roars rang out from the distance. 7 huge nebula beasts charged towards Jianqin, Qianlong, and Qianlong. Even though they were injured to varying degrees, their presences were extremely tremendous. The expressions of Jianqin, Qianlong, and Qianlong changed. The 7 nebula beasts were all at the Divine King's level, and 2 of them were at the Divine King's mid-level. Before they could think too much about it, the 7 Divine King nebula beasts had already shot over. They attacked Jianqin without any hesitation at all. 2 of the early Divine King nebula beasts looked at Master Qianlong. The great pressure made Master Qianlong's body sink suddenly. Master Qianlong became extremely stern. He was a formations master. If he used the most powerful formation he knew right now, he was extremely confident that he could kill the 2 early Divine King nebula beasts. However, he was currently being harassed by so many nebula beasts. How could he have the time to cast down a formation that could kill the Divine King nebula beasts? Jianqin and Keia's hearts sank as well. There were so many Divine King nebula beasts, and 2 of them were at the mid-Divine King nebula beasts. The 2 of them felt extremely pressured. Moreover, they could clearly sense that even more Divine King nebula beasts would arrive later if they continued to waste time. Suddenly, Keia had a flash of inspiration. In the next moment, her presence changed. She pointed her hands at the sky. The laws of destruction condensed in her right hand, while the laws of fire transformed into dazzling flames in her left. Between her hands, 3 inches above her head, the power of the laws of creation condensed. At that moment, the laws of creation, destruction, and fire gathered around Keia. As soon as the 3 laws appeared, they seemed to form a bridge that connected to the laws of the world. As a result, a sliver of the aura of the way actually appeared on Keia. She gave off an extremely profound presence. However, the presence of the way could not be sensed by ordinary people. Only powerful existences who had an extremely deep understanding of the mysteries of the world could sense it. As a result, even though Jianqin was right beside Keia, he was unable to sense the presence of the way. Suddenly, Keia extended a finger. With that, the laws of destruction, fire, and creation all surged out, striking one of the mid-Divine King nebula beasts with the presence of the way. The finger strike seemed ordinary, but it possessed unbelievable power. The huge body of the mid-Divine King nebula beast was actually reduced to dust silently. Let alone its body, not even its monster core remained. It directly dispersed into thin air. Keia shook violently after launching the strike. Her face rapidly paled. Awoo! At basically the same time as Keia launched the terrifying strike, Jianqin roared at the sky. However, this was a complete wolf's howl. With the howl, the power of the ancient skywolf's bloodline in Jianqin's body was completely drained in a single moment. A visible sound wave wreaked havoc in all the nebula beasts in outer space. It was enough to make all the millions of nebula beasts tremble. With Jianqin as the center, it spread out in all directions. Wherever the sound wave passed, countless nebula beasts howled in pain. The nebula beasts below the Divine King all bled from their orifices. Afterwards, their huge bodies lay motionless in outer space. Their vitality drained away in a single moment, reducing them to corpses. In the blink of an eye, the countless nebula beasts that trapped the three of them were all shaken to death by Jianshin's howl. Even the early Divine King nebula beasts stopped attacking Jianshin's group. They all howled in pain. The remaining mid-Divine King nebula beast became dazed and confused. It had temporarily lost consciousness. A single howl had killed tens of thousands of nebula beasts. Even Jianshin became stunned by this sight. Chapter 2020. As a space beast that had just reached chaotic prime, existences like Jianshin were not even ants in its eyes. However, Jianshin's howl earlier was enough to make even the chaotic prime nebula beast emperor shiver in fear. The nebula beast emperor basically noticed Jianshin immediately. The sword chi from Jianshin's hand was 10 meters long. Like a waterfall, it shone with resplendent light as it slashed out, mercilessly killing the stunned nebula beasts that had yet to return to their senses. Spurt, spurt, spurt. Immediately, blood sprayed through the air. Even though the nebula beasts were on the same level as the Divine King, their minds were still in a mess from the howl earlier. They were unable to put up any resistance at all, allowing Jianshin to cut through their heads effortlessly. In the blink of an eye, 5 of the 6 Divine King-level nebula beasts had been slain by Jianshin in a single second. Jianshin did not have the time to collect the 5 Divine King-level monster cores. His gaze was cold as the sword chi condensed in his hand became even more powerful. It shone like the sun as he continued to slash at the last mid-Divine King-level nebula beast. Currently, all the nebula beasts around Jianshin's group had been shaken to death by Jianshin's howl using the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The mid-Divine King-level nebula beast was the last space beast that could stop them from escaping. Once it was slain, Jianshin was completely confident that they could escape. Even if the other nebula beasts wanted to chase after them, they would struggle to catch up due to the distance between them. However, just when Jianshin was about to kill the last nebula beast, a bone-chilling coldness suddenly assaulted him. It made Jianshin feel like he had been plunged into an icy cavern. He was unable to move his limbs, and the sword chi that he had sent towards the nebula beast was forcefully stopped as well. Jianshin's heart suddenly sank as chills ran down his spine. His entire body immediately became icy cold. He could clearly sense that he had been locked onto by a terrifying presence that had completely exceeded his imagination. Under the influence of the presence, not only was his body immobilized, but even his blood seemed to freeze at that moment. Even his chaotic force became sluggish. At that moment, Jianshin felt like the end of the world had arrived. Jianshin turned his head with great difficulty and saw that the Nebula Beast Emperor that fought against the 5 Primordial Realm experts had already locked onto him with its huge eyes. Even though it was fighting against 5 Primordial Realm experts at the same time, it was still able to deal with them with ease while it was distracted. It firmly suppressed the 5 Primordial Realm experts. If it were not for the fact that Hong Mo, a peak infinite prime, was keeping the Nebula Beast Emperor busy, the Primordial Realm experts probably would have died to the Nebula Beast Emperor already. Kea and Chanlong paled as well. They were with Jianshin, so when Jianshin was locked onto by the Nebula Beast Emperor, even the two of them felt a terrifying pressure that chilled their hearts. In the next moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared. The entire region of space shook violently. The Nebula Beast Emperor's huge tail whipped towards Jianshin's group with devastating power. This tail was very thick, directly enveloping a part of the void. When the tail lashed down, the terrifying power caused cracks to appear in the void, forming a huge spatial crack. Before the tail had even arrived, Jianshin's group felt a suffocating pressure. Master Chanlong's skin even cracked as blood directly spurted out from his wounds. Before the Nebula Beast Emperor's tail had even arrived, the terrifying pressure was enough to pulverize the body of an overgod. Boom! At the same time, Hong Mo's presence surged. While the Nebula Beast Emperor was distracted, he used his ability to control space to deliver a full-powered strike. causing the Nebula Beast Emperor's planet-sized body to tremble violently. It was actually forcefully pushed several meters away. A huge wound had appeared on its huge body from Hong Mo's attack. The tail that the Nebula Beast Emperor originally aimed at Jianshin's group shifted as well, sweeping past Jianshin's group with terrifying destructive power. Immediately, the stars in the sky vanished from Jianshin's vision. What appeared before them was the spatial crack created by the Nebula Beast Emperor's huge tail. They could clearly see the endless spatial storms and streams wreaking havoc within. At the same time, the terrifying shockwaves from the battle between the Infinite Primes and the Nebula Beast Emperor surged over. Jianshin, Kea, and Master Chanlong were pushed into the spatial crack without being able to put up any resistance. Jianshin's face suddenly changed as soon as he entered the spatial crack. The spatial cracks in the Saints' world were incomparable to those on the Tianyuan continent. Let alone the Divine King, even Infinite Primes would struggle to survive once they entered. Jianshin's group of 3 immediately charged out as quickly as they could. However, the space within the spatial crack was very unstable. Even when the 3 of them moved as quickly as they could, and even when Jianshin used the linear lightning release, they were unable to leave. Instead, the 3 of them were sucked into the depths of the spatial crack by the chaotic space. In the blink of an eye, Jianshin's group of 3 became completely lost in the spatial crack. They were unable to find their way out. "We're in trouble now. We've actually fallen into a spatial crack," Master Chanlong said with a heavy voice. He understood the terrors of spatial cracks far better than Jianshin and Kea. Jianshin and Kea were extremely stern as well. They looked around and discovered that the surroundings were chaotic. Whether it was time, space, or the laws of the world, they were all in a mess here. In the distance, they could even clearly see the chaotic time distorting space and time, forming extremely unstable time vortexes that drifted about in the powerful spatial turbulence. Suddenly, Jianshin's eyes narrowed. He saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was the 3-eyed Demon King. He had also entered a spatial crack, and he was currently covered in blood as he dodged the streams of space that assaulted him from all directions. Suddenly, a stream of spatial turbulence slammed into the 3-eyed Demon King's body, sending him flying far away. He just happened to fall into an extremely unstable temporal vortex. His entire person rapidly aged under the time vortex. In less than a breath's time, he who originally had extremely strong vitality and looked like a middle-aged man, turned into a white-haired old man. In a few seconds, the tremendous life force within the 3-eyed Demon King completely vanished. He was reduced to a bag of bones. In a few seconds, the 3-eyed Demon King had lost all of his life force and died. His body had been reduced to a set of white bones, and his soul had dispersed. After the 4th breath, the bones that belonged to the 3-eyed Demon King turned into a pile of ashes and dissipated as if they had been through countless years. In just a few seconds, the 3-eyed Demon King seemed to have spent countless years in the temporal whirlpool. Even the Divine King's remains had rotted away. Chapter 2021. Jianshin became even more fearful of temporal whirlpools after what the 3-eyed Demon King had gone through. Once he entered one, even if he had reached the peak of godhood, he would still die. The tremendous life force within him would be drained away in just a few seconds. It was rumored that godhood experts had broken free from the restraints of lifespan and possessed the same lifespan as the world. However, after cultivating for so long, Jianshin had learnt more or less that the reason why godhood experts possessed the same lifespan as the world was because they would absorb the origin energy of the world when they cultivated, replenishing their life force at basically all the time. Their souls would also comprehend the laws of the world and undergo a qualitative change. As a result, the lifespan of godhood experts was said to be the same as the world. This was because there had basically never been a case of godhood experts dying from exhaustion in the history of the Saints' world. However, there was no origin energy to be absorbed in temporal whirlpools at all, so the life force that drained away could not be replenished. As a result, godhood experts would still die from exhaustion after a long period of time in temporal whirlpools. Even their souls would not be able to survive. Bang! Suddenly, a muffled sound rang out from beside them. A stream of chaotic energy that had passed by Jianqin was disturbed by the chaotic space, turning back without any prior signs. It struck Kaya's back heavily before the three of them could sense it. Kaya spat out a mouthful of blood as she was sent flying by the collision. Jianqin's face changed. He immediately charged over as quickly as he could and grabbed Kaya's hand. At the same time, Master Chanlong immediately caught up as well. He grabbed Kaya's other hand. However, there was no land in the chaotic spatial crack, nor was there any place for them to lean on. Coupled with the fact that Kaya's momentum was just too great, the inertia actually pulled Jianqin and Chanlong along with him. They were unable to stop themselves. Spatial storms, chaotic streams of energy, and temporal whirlpools were everywhere in the spatial crack. There just happened to be a huge temporal whirlpool right before Jianqin, Chanlong, and Chanlong. It was several dozen meters wide. At this moment, Jianqin, Chanlong, and Chanlong rapidly approached the huge temporal whirlpool uncontrollably. They were unable to stop themselves. Jianqin's face changed. The temporal whirlpool that had destroyed the three-eyed Demon King was only several meters wide, yet the temporal whirlpool before them was several dozen meters wide. Without any hesitation, Jianqin immediately pulled out a large number of medium and high-quality saint artifacts from his space ring and tossed them out. He controlled all the saint artifacts to explode before him. Master Chanlong pulled out a few saint artifacts from his space ring and tossed them forward as well. He also controlled the saint artifacts to explode. Boom! 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 With a series of rumbles, the powerful shock waves from the explosion of the saint artifacts finally stabilized Jianqin, Chanlong, and Chanlong. Without any hesitation, they immediately distanced themselves from the huge temporal whirlpool as quickly as they could. Even though the three of them were in horrible shape, they had managed to avoid the danger of being sucked into the temporal whirlpool. However, the explosion of so many saint artifacts caused a chain reaction in the spatial crack, causing even more chaotic streams of energy to wreak havoc. Terrifying storms of various sizes were mixed in as well, causing the entire region of space to distort in an extremely unstable manner. Jianqin, Kaya, and Master Chanlong's faces all changed drastically. At this moment, many chaotic streams of energy and spatial storms had appeared around them, rapidly approaching them. Moreover, the space around the three of them had become chaotic. Even though they flew as fast as they could into the distance, they discovered that not only were they still standing where they were, but their bodies were even drawn closer to a huge spatial storm under the influence of space. That feeling was like rowing a boat against the current. In a swift river, no matter how fast you rowed the boat couldn't move forward at all. Instead, it was pushed back by the current. Clearly, that was what Jianqin and the others were facing right now. Jianqin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong became extremely stern. The spatial storm before them was several tens of thousand meters wide. It possessed a heart-shaking power of destruction. Just a single glance was enough to fill Jianqin and the others with a sense of death. Once they were sucked into the spatial storm, it would be impossible for the three of them to survive. Quick, enter the tower. In this moment of life and death, Jianqin decisively took out the Inata tower that he had not used for quite some time. The Inata tower was an item of the Inata Grand Prime after all. It was a renowned god artifact, so its implications were just too great. As a result, Jianqin had always been worried that he would attract the attention of many great experts as soon as he took out the Inata tower after coming to the Saints' world. As a result, he had always hidden the Inata tower deeply. After all, he knew that many supreme experts in the Saints' world possessed the ability to peer into things. He did not want to see them find him through the Inata tower, which would expose the secret of the twin swords. However, there was nothing else he could do apart from the Inata tower right now. As a result, Jianqin could not care less. Even though the Inata Tower was damaged, Jianqin was still extremely confident in it. As soon as the Inata Tower appeared, a sliver of confusion appeared in Kaya's eyes. She stared at the completely unfamiliar, damaged tower in a daze. A sense of familiarity surged from the depths of her soul. Master Qianlong was stunned as well. He stared at the damaged tower without blinking at all. This was the first time he had seen the damaged tower, but he felt like he had seen it before. He felt like he had met Kaya for the first time in the Dong and province. They had clearly just met, but they felt like they had known each other for a very long time already. Before they could think too much about it, Jianqin had already pulled Qianlong and Kaya into the Inata Tower. Boom! As soon as the three of them vanished into the spatial crack, the huge spatial storm collided heavily with the Inata Tower, erupting with a deafening boom. However, the Inata Tower remained unmoved. The spatial storm that was several tens of thousand meters wide, enough to make Jianqin, Qianlong, and Qianlong pale, unable to move the damaged tower at all. Afterwards, streams of chaotic energy struck the Inata Tower one after another. However, the shockingly powerful streams of energy collapsed by themselves. The Inata Tower did not budge at all. At this moment, Jianqin, Kaya, and Qianlong all stared outside nervously. When they discovered that the streams of chaotic energy and spatial storms were unable to do anything to the Inata Tower, they finally let out a sigh of relief. Jianqin, where is this place? Kaya asked as he constantly looked around. The confusion and doubt in his eyes became heavier and heavier. Everything in the Inata Tower gave Kaya an extremely familiar feeling. This feeling became more and more intense. His trapped soul also left Master Qianlong's space ring. He used the formation banners to transform into a huge python as he constantly studied the miniature world on the first floor. He was secretly puzzled as he thought, where is this place? Have I been here before? This feeling is a little familiar, but it also feels so distant. This is a god artifact left behind by a supreme expert after his death. We're currently in the internal world of the god artifact. There are a total of 9 floors, and each floor is a world. The world we're in is the world on the first floor, said Jianqin. Afterwards, he looked into the distance. He could vaguely see that the world was dark, extremely far away. For huge swords hovered there, suppressing everything there. Chapter 2022. I never thought you'd be able to obtain such a powerful god artifact. It's only in a damaged state, yet the spatial storms and streams of energy outside are unable to do anything to it. It looks like this god artifact is of extremely high quality. Master Qianlong could not help but sigh in amazement. He constantly studied the space within the Inata Tower. He was still unable to understand why he found this place to be rather familiar. Fantastic! With this god artifact, we won't be threatened at all when we move through the spatial crack. Kaya was overjoyed. Then he seemed to think of something and frowned slightly. He looked at Jianqin and asked, Jianqin, how do we leave the spatial crack? Try and see if you can control the god artifact to attack and create an opening in the spatial crack that leads outside. Jianqin became stern when he heard that. He said, I've only refined a small portion of the god artifact, so I can only control it at the most basic level. I'm currently in the space within the god artifact, so let alone controlling it to attack, I can't even make it move at all. Jianqin paused before continuing. The god artifact we're in has already fallen into the spatial storms. The spatial storms can't threaten the god artifact, but to us, they're basically a place of certain death once we're in there. As a result, we can't leave the god artifact right now. Doesn't that mean we'll have to stay in there for a very long time until the spatial storms pass? Kaya asked with a frown. Not necessarily. Jianqin shook his head. I've only refined the first layer of the god artifact right now, so I can't control it to move in there. However, I believe that as my refinement of the god artifact deepens, my control over it will become greater and greater. There's no time to lose. I'll continue refining the god artifact right now. Be careful, the god artifact is already in the spatial storms, so you can't leave here. In the end, Jianqin sternly warned them before directly making his way to the 9th floor. The core that controlled the Anita Tower was a huge stone tablet on the 9th floor. Now, Jianqin had only refined a tiny portion of the bottom layer of the stone tablet. Jianqin stood on the 9th floor as he stared at the huge stone tablet that stood 300 meters tall in the distance. There used to be a projection of the heavenly palace of Bishing where the stone tablet was. He had seen an extremely beautiful statue in the heavenly palace of Bishing. He suspected that it was the Anita Grand Prime statue, and she wanted to leave her legacy to him. However, he learned from the sword spirits that the Anita Grand Prime's voice was the voice of the way, containing all the sounds in the world. The voice would change according to his wishes. If he thought it was a male voice, it would be a male voice. If he thought it was a female voice, it would be a female voice. As a matter of fact, if he thought it was the voice of a beast, it would become the voice of a beast when he heard it. However, the voice that Jianqin heard back then was truly a female voice. It was not the voice of the way that the sword spirits had described. At the same time, he saw a gaze that was extremely similar to the Anita Tower spirits from the eyes of the Anita Grand Prime's figure. As a result, Jianqin began to doubt the identity of the owner of the voice. He believed that the matter of the legacy back then was probably a scheme of the tower spirit. However, although the identity of the owner of the voice was doubtful, Jianqin was 90% convinced by what the Anita Grand Prime had gone through after the battle. Thinking about what had happened in the past, Jianqin could not help but think about the black bead that contained the laws of destruction that he had obtained. However, after realizing that what had happened back then was a scheme, he sealed the black pearl that contained the laws of destruction and never touched it. He was afraid that it would cause some sort of unforeseen event. Even though his current strength was countless times greater than before, he still did not plan on using the bead. Ming Dong was sent away by the teleportation formation in the projection of the heavenly palace of Bishing. I wonder how he is now. Jianqin stared at the original location of the heavenly palace of Bishing silently. Although he knew that Ming Dong was in the saint's world right now and that it was extremely likely for him to be in the heavenly palace of Bishing, he did not possess the power to travel such a great distance right now. The Anita Grand Prime was one of the 7 grand exalts of the saint's world in the past. As a result, Jianqin already knew that the Anita Grand Prime was on the Prosper Plane, one of the 7 sacred planes of the saint's world. The Prosper Plane was just too distant from the Cloud Plane. It was even after the Ice Pole Plane. If he took a spatial battleship from the Cloud Plane to the Prosper Plane, it would take several thousand years or even several tens of thousand years, even without any stops along the way. Once I have enough 5-colored divine crystals to pay for the teleportation formation, I'll go to the Prosper Plane to take a look. There's also my sister, Changyang Mingyue. In the blink of an eye, we've been separated for almost 200 years. I wonder how she's doing right now. But she has Shui Yunlan protecting her, so there's no need to fear ordinary people. However, my sister and Fairy Haoyue's moon god Hall are on the same plane, Jianqin thought. If he only had a vague idea of Shui Yunlan's strength back on the Tianyuan continent, then he had a deep understanding of just how terrifying Shui Yunlan's strength was now. The Divine King ranked 9th. He was an existence that could definitely rival primordial realm experts. He was extremely impressive in the saint's world. After calming himself down, Jianqin cast aside his miscellaneous thoughts. He sat down below the stone tablet and continued to refine the Anita Tower within the imperial palace of the Shi dynasty in the northern region of the Cloud Plain. The sword is not just a weapon in your eyes. It's your second life. If you want to comprehend the way of the sword, you need to fuse your soul with the sword and reach the level of fusing with the sword. You need to comprehend the true essence of the sword. At this moment, in a dazzling palace, a middle-aged man holding a long sword and wearing armor stood in the courtyard outside the palace. He spoke with conviction and conviction. A beautiful woman who seemed to be in her 20s stood before the middle-aged man. She also held a sword in her hand as she listened to the middle-aged man's teachings attentively. At this moment, a devastatingly beautiful woman in a long white dress slowly walked into the courtyard. Behind her, two pretty maids followed closely behind her. The arrival of the white-clothed woman immediately caused the expression of the armored, sword-wielding middle-aged man to change. He immediately bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Your Highness!" "Sister Shiyu, you've come." The woman who was learning the sword immediately beamed with joy. She stabbed her sword into the ground and jogged over. A sliver of affection appeared in Shiyu's eyes. She asked gently, "Mo Yen, how's learning the sword? I haven't disturbed you, have I?" No. It's been a few months since I've seen Sister Shiyu. I've been missing you for a long time." Mo Yen grabbed Shiyu's arm intimately and giggled. The woman who was learning the sword was Mo Yen. She had already been saved by the divine king of the Shi dynasty. Although Mo Yen was not a member of the Shi dynasty, her status in the Shi dynasty was extremely special due to her relationship with Shiyu. She was personally taken care of by the Emperor Shi and the Empress. The Emperor Shi and the Empress would often summon Mo Yen and learn about Shiyu's past from her. As a result, Mo Yen became the only person in the Shi dynasty who was closest to the Emperor Shi and the Empress aside from Princess Tin. She made all the princesses and princes of the Shi dynasty jealous. This was because many of the princes and princesses of the Shi dynasty had never seen the Emperor Shi and the Empress. Even if they did, they would only glance at them from very far away when the Emperor Shi and the Empress ventured out, let alone summon them. Chapter 2023. As for Shiyu, it went without saying. As the only daughter of the current Emperor and Empress, she was like a resplendent pearl in the Shi dynasty. She was doted on by the Emperor Shi and the Empress. She was doted on by everyone. Moreover, Shiyu could freely use the tremendous amount of cultivation resources that the Shi dynasty had accumulated over countless years, including various high-level cultivation methods, battle skills, and rare heavenly resources. As a matter of fact, she did not even need to ask for them. There would be female attendants who would present them to her politely. Shiyu basically had everything she wanted in the Shi dynasty now. No matter what she needed, even if it was god-tier heavenly resources or pills, she only needed to ask for them, and someone would deliver them to her very quickly. As for cultivation, an infinite prime of the laws of the sword would personally guide her. He basically passed on everything he knew to her without holding back at all. Even the Empress would often personally guide Shiyu in her cultivation. Emperor she would visit often as well, passing on everything he knew about cultivation to her without holding back at all. Shiyu's talent had always been extraordinary. Back in the Mo clan, she was able to become a god in an extremely short amount of time despite the horrible conditions. Now that she had the guidance of a great master and an inexhaustible supply of cultivation resources, Shiyu's rate of improvement in the Shi Empire could be described as divine. As for Emperor Shi and the Empress, Shiyu's attitude towards them gradually changed from her initial resistance and unforgivable attitude. In particular, when she learnt that her parents had been hunted down by their enemies and had nowhere to go, only able to flee across the entire cloud plain. They could die at any time. In the end, they had no choice but to abandon her in pain in order to protect her. As a result, she began to forgive her parents. Coupled with the fact that Emperor Shi and the Empress had showered her with meticulous care in the Shi dynasty, Shiyu had truly accepted her parents and accepted her current identity. Of course, there was another reason that only Shiyu knew. Once she became the princess of the Shi dynasty, she could indirectly help Jianqin. Mo Yen, you've finally broken through the Holy Emperor realm and reached the Origin realm. Looks like you've been working quite hard in the past few years. Shiyu studied Mo Yen and gently chuckled. Mo Yan's smile immediately vanished when she heard that. She became stern as she clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. Ever since I recovered, I swore that I would work hard on cultivation. I would become an expert who stood at the apex of the saint's world, because only with great strength can no one bully you. Sister Mo Yen, you have to remember your oath and work hard on your cultivation. I'll find a way to help you with everything you need for cultivation, Shiyu said happily. In the past, Mo Yen had never paid much attention to cultivation, which gave her a huge headache. Now that she had gone through a disaster, Mo Yen had begun to mature as well. Mo Yan's life is just too good. She's actually so close to the princess. She'll be able to get whatever she wants in the future. The middle-aged man who guided Mo Yen became envious when he heard Shiyu's words. Even though he was a divine king and a divine king of the way of the sword, he still could not stop himself from thinking like that. The Shi dynasty was not an ancient empire. Instead, it was an eternal empire with chaotic primes. As a resplendent pearl of the empire, Shiyu only needed to ask gently, and the things she could obtain were enough to make many divine kings envious. Sister Shiyu, have you found Patriarch Genshin? Mo Yen looked at Shiyu eagerly. She was extremely concerned about Genshin's safety right now. Shiyu's eyes dimmed when she heard that. She shook her head gently and said, I only know that Genshin has left the cloud plane on a spatial battleship. Finding him will be extremely difficult. However, I believe that Genshin will return. I hope Patriarch Genshin is safe and doesn't come across any dangers outside, Shiyu prayed earnestly. Mo Yen prayed for Genshin seriously before saying to Shiyu, Sister Shiyu, I miss Father. I want to return to the Dong and province. Yeah, I've come to find you this time to take you back to the Dong and province. The imperial palace is great, but in my heart the Dong and province is where we belong, Shiyu said with mixed feelings. Suddenly, she looked at the sky above her and thought, Genshin, where are you? Do you know that I'm already the princess of the Shi dynasty? As long as I ask, I can even invite the infinite primes of the empire. I can completely protect the Tianyuan family from the threats of the heavenly demon religion. The vice leader of the heavenly demon religion won't be able to make trouble for you anymore. I just hope you can return sooner. Today was the liveliest day the Tianyuan family had been in the Dong and province for many years. The entire clan was decorated with lanterns and banquets. It was a joyous scene. This was because the princess of the Shi dynasty, the daughter of the current Emperor Shi, had personally come to the Tianyuan family. Instead of saying that she had personally come, it was more accurate to say that she had returned to the Tianyuan family. This was because the Tianyuan family could be described as Shiyu's home. As Shiyu's only daughter, Emperor Shi naturally doted on her. When his beloved daughter traveled, he was like a moon surrounded by stars. Just the experts accompanying her included several divine kings. Moreover, even the master that Emperor Shi had found for his beloved daughter, the infinite prime of the way of the sword who was a subject of the Shi dynasty, had come to the Dong and province with Shiyu. He carried a large number of resources that the Emperor Shi had personally given him to assist Shiyu with her cultivation. Shiyu's arrival naturally alarmed the divine king. He appeared in the Dong and province as soon as possible. Even the heavenly moon empire, whether it was the imperial family or the two great sects of the empire, the Taoist sect of calm clouds and the earth spirit sect, all sent divine king experts to visit the princess with lavish gifts. Since the princess has come, it's time for me to return, the infinite prime who had watched over the Tianyuan family in the past few years said with a smile. He was a ruddy old man. He had come to the Tianyuan family from the Shi dynasty with Emperor Shi and the Empress. After Emperor Shi left, he had remained in the Tianyuan family under Emperor Shi's orders. Oh, right. However, Your Highness, one of the vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion is still in the Dong and province. He's paying attention to everything in the province at all times. So he's probably up to no good, the old man continued. Shiyu's face sank when she heard that. Intense killing intent flashed through her eyes. She said to the plainly dressed old man beside her, Master, can you discover this person's existence? Shiyu's master was called Sun Fan. Sun Fan nodded gently when he heard that. Yeah, he's currently hiding in a small corner of the provincial city. Although I've never seen the 3 vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion, I've heard about them. He should be Huayan. Then may I ask who's stronger, master, compared to Huayan? Shiyu asked as the light in her eyes flickered. Sun Fan laughed involuntarily. Are you worried that I can't keep Huayan under control? Ha ha ha, don't worry. Huayan is only a 1st heavenly layer infinite prime, while I'm a 5th heavenly layer infinite prime. Shiyu beamed. Afterwards, she gritted her teeth and said, Master, please chase Huayan out of the Dong'an province. Sun Fan stroked his long, white beard and chuckled. And I had thought you wanted me to kill Huayan for you. Huayan is one of the vice leaders of the heavenly demon religion. Although his personal cultivation is nothing in my eyes, the backing of the heavenly demon religion is just too powerful. Killing him will cause a huge mess, and even your father will struggle to deal with it. However, chasing him away won't be difficult. I'll go over right now. With that, Sun Fan vanished silently. Chapter 2024. I made a mistake before and wrote Shui Yunlan as the 3rd Divine King instead of the 9th. It has been corrected now. At this moment, the black-robed Huayan sat beside a pond in an extremely remote courtyard in the provincial city. He held a fishing rod as he fished out of boredom. However, Huayan did not react at all after the hook had been hooked away. Clearly, his thoughts were not on fishing at all. The princess of the Shi dynasty, Shiyu, has returned to the Tianyuan family. With how Emperor Shi treats his daughter, there must be experts among her guards. Bastard, it'll be even more difficult for us to wipe out the Tianyuan family now. Huayan's face was extremely sunken as he was furious. Time was unable to wash away his fury and hatred. Although a few years had passed, his desire to wipe out the Tianyuan family did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even more intense. However, there was a primordial realm expert from the Shi dynasty present in the Tianyuan family, so Huayan was unable to do anything. As a result, he had always waited in the provincial city, waiting for the primordial realm expert to leave before taking action to wipe out the Tianyuan family. However, he had never thought that after waiting for several years, not only did the primordial realm expert fail to leave, but the princess of the Shi dynasty even returned. Huayan, this is not where you should be. Do you want to leave by yourself, or do you want the old man to invite you out? At this moment, an old and indifferent voice rang out from behind Huayan. The voice had appeared without any prior signs, which was why Huayan's heart quivered when he heard it. He stood up out of reflex. Shiyu's master, Sun Fan, had appeared behind Huayan silently. As Sun Fan had concealed his presence and his cultivation was much greater than Huayan's, Huayan failed to sense his arrival at all. Who are you? Huayan's expression was ugly as he looked at the old man. He knew that the old man was not the one who had always been with the Tianyuan family. It was extremely likely that he had just arrived with the princess of the Shi dynasty. This filled him with bitterness. Emperor Shi sure was willing to go to great lengths for his daughter, actually getting a primordial realm expert to protect her. Even in eternal empires, primordial realm experts were supreme existences. Their status was extremely great. You don't need to know who the old man is. You only need to understand that if you don't leave this place, then the old man can only personally invite you out. As he said that the terrifying presence of a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime gradually radiated from him. Huayan became extremely furious when he sensed Sun Fan's strength, but in the end he could only snort coldly. He glanced at Sun Fan coldly before directly leaving. Sun Fan also sighed gently after Huayan's departure. He murmured to himself helplessly, the heavenly demon religion. If it weren't for the deterrence of the Great Elder, why would the cloud plane allow you to continue existing here? Ah, a small, damaged, golden tower hovered alone in the spatial crack. An extremely huge spatial storm wreaked havoc around the tower. Let alone divine king experts Even infinite primes would not necessarily be able to escape if they were caught in it. In the first floor of the tower, Master Chanlong sat on the ground as he cultivated and comprehended the laws of formations. Kea moved around the first floor all by herself. She constantly studied the surroundings, carefully observing every inch of space. Her beautiful eyes would often be filled with confusion and confusion. She discovered that every single inch of land and every single world here gave her an extremely strong sense of familiarity. However, no matter how hard she tried to think about it, she was unable to understand where this sense of familiarity came from. Jianqin sat below the stone tablet on the 9th floor like a statue. He was still refining the Inata Tower. The Inata Tower had fallen into the spatial crack, so time was a mess there. As a matter of fact, he could not even sense the flow of time. So Jianqin had no idea how long he had spent refining the tower this time. However, he had already refined the 4th floor of the Inata Tower. Now he was refining the 5th floor. The Inata Tower had a total of 9 floors. If he wanted to completely control the Inata Tower and truly turn it into his own god artifact, he needed to refine all 9 floors. However, after refining the 4th floor, Jianqin discovered that although he was still unable to completely control the Inata Tower, his control over the tower had increased by a lot. For example, now that he was in the Inata Tower, he could already control the movement of the Inata Tower. However, it moved extremely slowly. Once something happened, the Inata Tower would not even be able to dodge in time with its speed. As a result, he needed to refine the 5th floor of the Inata Tower to strengthen his control over the tower. Jianqin clearly found refining the 5th floor extremely difficult. His progress was extremely slow, but he had completely forgotten about time. He was completely immersed in refining the 5th floor. After who knew how much time had passed, it might have been a few months, a few years, or even several decades, Jianqin finally refined the 5th floor. At this moment, Jianqin could clearly sense that his control over the Inata Tower had become much easier. As a matter of fact, even with his eyes closed, he could clearly sense that the Inata Tower would move according to his will as long as he willed it. It felt like a sliver of his soul had fused with the Inata Tower. Aside from that, Jianqin discovered to his surprise that he could use the Inata Tower to launch the simplest attacks after refining the 5th floor. However, the Inata Tower was extremely damaged, and it was under the suppression of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. As a result, even if he could use the Inata Tower to launch attacks, the power would not be too great. Jianqin slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at the half-refined stone tablet before him before silently vanishing. He did not continue refining the 6th floor because refining the first 5 floors was his limit with his current strength. Jianqin returned to the 1st floor. With a thought, he connected to the world on the 1st floor and immediately learnt about Master Chanlong and Kea's situation. Master Chanlong was currently comprehending the laws of formations, so Jianqin did not disturb him. Instead, with a thought, he used the power of the 1st floor to teleport himself to Kea's side. At this moment, Kaya stood at the eastern end of the 1st floor. It was called the end because the space up ahead had already been destroyed. The entire space was pitch black, and the figure of a huge sword hung high in the sky, suppressing the area. Kea currently stood there with his head raised. He stared at the sword that the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt had left behind in the past in a daze. Jianqin raised his head as well. He glanced at the huge strand of sword chi in the sky. His eyes were filled with some emotion and pity. He said, "Kaya, I can already move this god artifact freely. We'll find a way out very soon." Chapter 2025. Jianqin also stared at the strand of sword chi left behind by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt for a while. He felt pity inside. His comprehension of the laws of the sword had already reached the peak of the partial achievement of sword spirit. He was only a step away from the major achievement of sword spirit, but this step was not so easy to cross. Although the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt's sword chi remained inside, and outside the Inata Tower, it came from a sword god. To the current Jianqin, The level of the sword chi was just too high. Even if he wanted to comprehend the sword chi, he would not be able to do so. Moreover, the main purpose of the sword chi was to suppress the Inata Tower. As a result, the sword chi was filled with great offensive power. Without the corresponding strength, forcefully trying to comprehend the sword chi would not only fail, but they would even suffer an extremely powerful backlash. The backlash was so powerful that Jianqin believed that even the Divine King could die from it. After Jianqin and Kea left, Jianqin immediately controlled the Inata Tower to move through the spatial crack rapidly in search of a way out. Due to the protection of the Inata Tower, Jianqin no longer acted cautiously in the spatial crack. He became fearless as he rampaged through the spatial crack. Even if he came across powerful streams of energy or spatial storms, Jianqin would directly smash through them. Only the temporal vortexes were something that Jianqin feared. Whenever he came across them, he would avoid them from afar. The damaged Inata Tower drifted through the spatial crack. Who knew just how far it had crossed in this chaotic space and how much time had passed? However, Jianqin still failed to find a way out. Instead, Jianqin discovered a few floating corpses along the way. Almost all of them were incomplete. Not a single one was intact. Jianqin also came across a few living people. He personally witnessed the death of the Divine King and several overgods. They had all fallen into temporal vortexes and experienced the reversal of time. In just a few seconds, they turned into newborn babies before vanishing without a trace, reduced to nothingness. At the same time, Jianqin discovered a few Origin Realm cultivators who had also been sucked into the spatial crack. They survived there with great difficulty. Luck played a huge role in surviving in the spatial crack. If they were unlucky, let alone the Divine King, even primordial realm experts would face great danger. This was because the space there was very unstable. It would often distort, where the front and back would be reversed. Some streams of energy that originally flew very far away would be affected by the chaotic space and suddenly appear before them without any prior signs, catching them off guard. Even the Divine King would not necessarily be able to dodge them at times. However, if they were lucky, they could survive for quite a long time, even if they were only at the Origin Realm or even lower. They might even be able to find a way out. However, at this moment, Jianqin's face changed as he controlled the Inata Tower from the first floor. He immediately moved the Inata Tower to one side as quickly as he could. As soon as the Inata Tower moved, a huge hand condensed from energy reached over with terrifying might. If it were not for Jianqin's quick reactions, the Inata Tower probably would have ended up in the hand already. A primordial realm expert. Jianqin's heart shivered. He immediately controlled the Inata Tower to fly off into the distance. It actually dodged it. A voice filled with surprise rang out. An effeminate young man appeared where the Inata Tower had just been. He stared at the Inata Tower as it flew off into the distance. He murmured, "This crappy tower is already so damaged, yet it can still move around fearlessly. It looks like it's a god artifact at the very least, and it's of quite a high grade. I'll be taking this god artifact for sure." Before he had even finished talking, the young man chased after the Inata Tower with a flash. The Inata Tower was naturally not as fast as an infinite prime. Very soon, the effeminate young man caught up to the Inata Tower. Jianqin became stern as he controlled the Inata Tower. He suddenly changed his path, charging towards the extremely chaotic space nearby. Powerful streams of energy and spatial storms filled the space there. The laws of the world were in a mess. The young man behind him could not help but hesitate when he saw the Inata Tower charge into the dangerous region. However, he gritted his teeth and chased after the Inata Tower. In the extremely chaotic space, there was a spatial storm several tens of thousand meters in diameter. It was like an extremely huge tornado, rapidly revolving in the region. It wreaked havoc as much as it could, giving off a chilling presence. Around the spatial storm, There were over a dozen smaller spatial storms revolving around it. Powerful streams of energy collided with each other from time to time, erupting with devastating might. Jianqin directly charged into the largest spatial storm under the control of the Inata Tower. He completely ignored the terrifying might of the spatial storm and directly passed through it. At the same time, he tossed out a huge, two-handed sword. He had found this sword in the interspatial ring of the leader of the Swords Wolf Adventurers. It was a supreme quality saint artifact. Boom! As soon as the huge sword was tossed out, it exploded loudly. Although the power from the explosion of a supreme quality saint artifact was unable to threaten infinite primes at all, it broke the peace there. Immediately, all the spatial storms and streams of energy in the extremely chaotic space became extraordinarily violent. They erupted with terrifying destructive power, which made Jianqin shiver inside the Inata Tower. He felt a chill run down his spine. The eyes of the pursuing infinite prime narrowed as well. He immediately retreated. Even though he was an infinite prime, he did not dare to get too close. The laws in the spatial crack were chaotic, so even though he was an infinite prime, he was unable to use the laws of the primordial realm. His strength was greatly affected. Do you think you can escape from me just like that? If the person hiding in the tower knows what's good for you, hand over the tower obediently, and I can take you out. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless, the feminine young man said coldly. The effeminate young man said coldly. Seeing how the Inata Tower remained unscathed in the terrifying spatial storm, standing there like a mountain, he became even more fired up. Jianqin ignored the young man. While he was obstructed, he immediately moved the Inata Tower away. He wanted to escape from the senses of the infinite prime before the space stabilized. However, as soon as the Inata Tower moved, it came to a halt. Not only did it not move away, but it even turned around and charged towards the center of the terrifying storm as quickly as it could. Jianqin was pleasantly surprised on the first floor of the Inata Tower. He discovered that when the terrifying storm erupted, it had actually ripped open the space there, creating crack that led to the outside world. The primordial realm expert had clearly discovered the crack to the outside world as well. His face suddenly changed and he became worried. He had also searched for a very long time for a path to the outside world, but he had never thought that the terrifying spatial storm would rip it open here. However, with the terrifying spatial storm wreaking havoc here, even if he wanted to return to the saint's world very much, he did not dare to approach it. What infuriated him even more was that the small tower, which was obviously a god artifact, completely ignored the storm of destruction that even he feared, and quickly flew towards the crack. Bastard! The young man flew into a rage out of humiliation. He sent out a powerful strike towards the storm in an attempt to stop the Inata Tower from entering the crack. However, his strike was unable to penetrate the storm at all. Instead, it made the storm even more vicious and violent, forcing him to retreat again and again. Chapter 2026. After passing through the spatial crack, Jianqin finally returned to the outer space of the saint's world. He sat in the Inata Tower as he sensed the familiar scenery of outer space. He was unable to contain his excitement as he sighed emotionally. When he thought about how he had drifted through the spatial crack alone and how he had been surrounded by danger several times, constantly on the brink of death, Jianqin struggled to calm down. The reason why he could survive for so long in the spatial crack and pass through so many dangerous regions was not because of his strength. Instead, it was because of his extremely tough Inata Tower. If it were not for the Inata Tower, Jianqin had no idea whether he, Kea, Chanlong, and the others would have made it back to the saint's world alive. With a flash, Jianqin, Kea, and Master Chanlong appeared silently in the boundless outer space of the saint's world. Master Chanlong had emerged from seclusion recently as well. He had left the Inata Tower with Jianqin. Whether it was Kea or Master Chanlong, they all felt like they had survived a disaster as they looked at the familiar space. They sighed emotionally inside. Master Chanlong Can you tell where we are right now? Jianqin looked around and asked Qianlong. Although they had escaped from the spatial crack, Jianqin had become completely lost in outer space. He had lost his sense of direction. He stowed the Anita tower away as soon as he could. The implications of this item were just too great, so he could not expose it. He only dared to use it in the other space in the spatial crack. Once he returned to the saint's world, he would not dare to take it out with his current strength. Master Qianlong also stared at the vast space in confusion. He shook his head and said, "This is also the first time I've left the cloud plane. I don't have a star map on me, so I have no idea where we are right now." Jianqin sighed gently when he heard that. He said, "If that's the case, we can only choose a direction. I hope we can come across someone who can ask for directions along the way." Afterwards, Jianqin and Kea boarded carriage that Master Qianlong had taken out. Driven by formations, they randomly chose a direction and shot off into outer space. The journey through outer space was long. The carriage was not even a 10,000th of the spatial battleship's speed. The people in the carriage did not even see any signs of the stars moving for several days. It was a huge contrast to the spatial battleship when they had seen the stars fly by like raindrops. However, Jianqin and the other two were mentally prepared for this. As a result, the three of them spent their days cultivating in the carriage. They traveled as they cultivated. Several days later, Jianqin and Kea opened their eyes at the same time. They looked into the distance and saw over 30 huge space beasts appear before their eyes. Their eyes were scarlet as they roared and charged towards the carriage that Jianqin and the other two were in. There's an early divine king, and the others are all over gods and gods. Jianqin stared at the space beasts in the distance. Space beasts were different from magical beasts. They only moved through outer space, hunting and reproducing. They absorbed the energy in outer space to strengthen themselves. They basically never approached land inhabited by cultivators. This was because the vast expanse of outer space was where they belonged. This was their home. This was similar to how some human experts who were used to living on land would never go to the sea to survive, even if the sea could not drown them. However, perhaps due to some inherent deficiencies, these space beasts were unable to assume human form at all. No matter how powerful they were unable to change their appearance, and their intelligence was low. Even if some of the more powerful beings among them possessed extraordinary intelligence, they were still far from being able to compare to the deceitful humans. "Let's go deal with them. We'll get it over with quickly," Kea suggested. Jianqin nodded. He immediately charged out of the carriage with Kea and charged towards the group of space beasts. Naturally, the small group of space beasts was not a problem for Jianqin and Kea. Very soon, Jianqin slew the Divine King level space beast and took away the Divine King level energy core along the way. Kea killed all the remaining space beasts and took away all the energy cores as well. Afterwards, he returned to the carriage with Jianqin and continued on their way. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, Jianqin and the other two had drifted in outer space for over a year. Outer space was not peaceful. During the year of travel, they would often be surrounded and attacked by space beasts. The carriage they used to travel had already been destroyed, so the three of them were forced to fly through outer space personally. Who knew how many space beasts had died to their hands during the year? Even space beasts on the level of the Divine King level numbered over a dozen in total. They had even come across a late Divine King level space beast once. Jianqin and the other two struggled in that battle. All three of them were injured to varying degrees. In the end, Jianqin and Kea were responsible for keeping the space beast busy while Master Qianlong set up the strongest killing formation. With the help of the killing formation, they managed to kill the space beast. Traveling through outer space was extremely dangerous. If it were not for the fact that Jianqin and Kea possessed extraordinary battle prowess, Many divine kings probably would not have been able to survive the danger that Jianqin and the other two faced. They would definitely have died to space beasts. Just when the three of them passed by a meteor, a deep rumbling sound suddenly rang out. A large swathe of black shadows constantly flew out from the meteor, forming a black cloud that quickly surrounded the three of them. Jianqin and the other two's faces changed when they saw this. They could already tell that the black cloud was formed by winged space beasts that were half the size of a person. They were not powerful individually, but there were so many of them that it made Jianqin and the other two shiver. In just a few seconds, the number of space beasts that had flown out from the meteor had already reached 1 million, and this number was still increasing at an extremely terrifying rate. "Let's go!" Jianqin called out as he quickly fled with Kea and Master Chanlong. There were just too many space beasts. Once they were surrounded, it would be very difficult to break free. However, they had still underestimated the space beasts that were only half the size of a person and were not particularly powerful. They flapped their wings and moved extremely quickly in outer space. Like streaks of light, they surrounded Jianqin and the other two very soon. With a wave of his hand, Jianqin sent out a huge streak of light that killed several dozen space beasts in a single moment. He charged out as quickly as he could with Kea and Master Chanlong. Just when the three of them were surrounded by the space beasts, a silver-white streak of light suddenly appeared in the distance. A spaceship that was only several hundred meters in size moved through outer space extremely quickly. The spatial battleship was originally just passing by, but when it passed by the group of space beasts, it suddenly slowed down. In the end, it stopped in the distance. Chapter 2027. As the voice rang out, a brown-robed old man silently appeared on the deck of the silver-white spaceship. He stared at the soul-devouring beasts that surrounded Jianqin's group with some surprise and joy. The essence blood of the soul-devouring beast king is essential for refining the cloud rise pill, while the soul of the soul-devouring beast king is also one of the main materials for refining the soul vitality pill. These two pills are both god-tier pills, the brown-robed old man murmured to himself as his eyes shone brighter and brighter. Soul-devouring beast kings were extremely rare in the Saints' world because not only did they exist in the boundless outer space, but they were also space beasts. Finding one in outer space was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack, and they were extremely rare as well. It would be very difficult to come across one normally. However, encountering a soul-devouring beast king was a great fortune. This was because every part of a soul-devouring beast king was a treasure. The essence, blood, and soul of a soul-devouring beast king were essential for refining the cloud rise pill and the soul vitality pill. Great Elder, have we arrived at the Tsang, Poseidon Palace already? At this moment, a middle-aged man arrived beside the old man. His face was filled with respect as he looked around suspiciously. The brown-robed old man looked at Jianqin's group of three, who were surrounded by soul-devouring beasts, and said, "There's still some way to go before we reach the Tsang Poseidon Palace, but we might be able to benefit greatly here." Benefit greatly? The middle-aged man became slightly doubtful when he heard that. However, he soon discovered the soul-devouring beast horde in the distance, and his eyes immediately lit up. He said, "With so many soul-devouring beasts, a soul-devouring beast king must have been born. I never thought that we would come across such a fortuitous encounter on our way to the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Great Elder, once we capture a soul-devouring beast king and refine it into the cloud rise pill and the soul vitality pill, it will be extremely significant to our Yun family." The Grand Elder nodded and said, "That's right. The cloud rising pill is a pill used to increase one's cultivation. Its value goes without saying. In particular, the divine origin pill is a divine pill used to heal injuries to the soul, making it even more precious. A holy emperor of the eternal Jade Drop Empire just so happened to have his soul injured, and he still hasn't recovered. Once we use the soul of the soul-devouring Beast King to refine the divine origin pill and offer it to the Holy Emperor of the Jade Drop Empire, our Yun family will have done a great service. In the future, our status in the southern region will definitely rise. That middle-aged man was clearly extremely excited as he said, "Grand Elder is right. Our Yun clan may even be able to use this opportunity to climb up the giant tree that is the Jade Drop Empire. If that really happens, who in the southern region will dare to provoke our Yun clan in the future?" The middle-aged man then looked at Jianqin, Heiyu, and Heiyu, and a sliver of surprise flashed through his eyes. He said, "The three people who have been surrounded by the soul-devouring beasts possess extraordinary strength as well. They're clearly over-gods, but I can sense presences that are no weaker than the Divine King from two of them. The young man and woman are indeed very powerful. With their strength, they must be supreme over-gods on the over-gods plaque, and they must be ranked quite high. However, it's a pity that they encountered a swarm of soul-devouring beasts. Although the soul-devouring beasts aren't powerful individually, there are so many of them that they can't kill them all. Even with the cultivation of the Divine King, they will be whittled down to death by the swarm of soul-devouring beasts. If the three of them don't have any methods to escape, it'll be difficult for them to escape today." The great elder nodded. However, if it weren't for the three of them drawing out the soul-devouring beasts today, the old man would never have discovered the soul-devouring Beast King here. Since that's the case, the old man will help them out today and help them break free. However, there are still countless soul-devouring beasts hidden in the meteor. The three of them can draw out all the soul-devouring beasts, which will save the old man some effort. It'll make it easier for him to deal with the soul-devouring Beast King. The great elder was in no hurry to take action. Instead, he stood on the deck of the spaceship and watched on. On the other side, Genshin's group had already been surrounded by a dense swarm of soul-devouring beasts. In the beginning, there were only around 1 million soul-devouring beasts, but now, as more and more soul-devouring beasts flew out from the meteor, the number of soul-devouring beasts surrounding Genshin's group had reached several tens of millions, or even over 100 million. From afar, it really did seem like a blanket. It was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Even though the soul-devouring beasts were not powerful, with not a single one on the level of the Divine King yet, Genshin's group was unable to kill their way through with so many of them, let alone charge out. However, Genshin remained calm despite being surrounded by a sea of soul-devouring beasts. He extended the senses of his soul and paid close attention to the meteor in the distance. A while later, when no more soul-devouring beasts flew out from the meteor, Genshin knew that all the soul-devouring beasts hiding inside were probably outside now. At the same time, the light of excitement flickered through the great elder's eyes as he stood on the deck of the spaceship in the distance. The time to kill the soul-devouring Beast King had come. However, just when the great elder was about to fly out, a cold light flashed through Genshin's eyes. He used the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him and howled at the sky. Immediately, a high-pitched wolf's howl rang through the surroundings. At that moment, Genshin was clearly only a laid-over god, but he gave off an extremely terrifying presence. Vaguely, a colossal wolf seemed to appear behind him. It radiated with supreme might, causing the sun, moon, and stars to tremble. The terrifying sound wave turned into visible ripples that rapidly expanded into the surroundings from Genshin. The sound wave possessed an extremely terrifying might. The soul-devouring beasts that blanketed the surroundings around Genshin were all reduced to dust by the sound wave. In the blink of an eye, an empty space appeared in a radius of several hundred meters around Genshin. Although the soul-devouring beasts that were several hundred meters away had not been reduced to dust, their bodies had been reduced to pieces. Even though many soul-devouring beasts had not been reduced to pieces further away, they had all died to the sound wave. In just a short moment, over half of the soul-devouring beasts had died to Genshin's howl. Although the remaining ones managed to survive due to the great distance, their eyes were all dazed as if they had lost their souls. They stood there blankly, unable to attack Genshin and the others. "Let's go!" Jianshan called out to Kea and Master Chanlong. They immediately charged out as quickly as they could. Now that the soul-devouring beasts were no longer pursuing them, it was the perfect opportunity to leave. Once the surviving soul-devouring beasts recovered, it would be difficult for them to leave. This was because the wolf's howl had borrowed the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Now that the power of the bloodline had been depleted, it would not be able to use it again in a short period of time. On the spatial battleship, the Great Elder and the middle-aged man stared at the scene in the distance in shock. Disbelief filled their faces. What is this battle skill? How is it so powerful? The middle-aged man felt his mouth dry up as he stared at the soul-devouring beasts that had been reduced by half. He was utterly shocked. What terrifying might from that howl! The Great Elder was shocked as well. Afterwards, he seemed to think of something and immediately made his way to the meteor. With just a single step, he crossed the extremely great distance between them and appeared on the meteor. As soon as Genshin's group of 3 charged out from the soul-devouring beasts, they discovered that a spatial battleship had stopped there silently in the distance. The spatial battleship was extremely far away from them in the first place. Coupled with the fact that they had been focused on dealing with the soul-devouring beasts earlier, they had failed to sense when the spatial battleship had arrived. It was also at this moment that a sharp cry rang out from the meteor. A soul-devouring beast that was 3 meters long and shone with purple light flew out from the meteor. With great fury, it directly pursued Genshin's group. To no surprise, 8 soul-devouring beasts that were 3 meters long circled around it. The 8 soul-devouring beasts possessed battle prowess on par with the Divine King. They followed the soul-devouring Beast King like guards. Chapter 2028. The expressions of Genshin, Kea, and Master Chanlong suddenly changed when they saw the soul-devouring Beast King in pursuit. Once they were caught by the soul-devouring Beast King behind them, they would definitely be embroiled in a difficult battle. Hee, soul-devouring Beast King. Old man was just about to go in and find you. I never thought you'd actually run out yourself. That's great. However, at this moment, a brown-robed old man suddenly appeared. His eyes lit up as he stared at the soul-devouring Beast King in excitement. He suddenly struck out. The old man was extremely powerful, having completely surpassed the Divine King. With a wave of his hand, terrifying energy shook up the space there. Primordial realm laws descended, splitting into several powerful attacks that struck the soul-devouring beasts. The power of the old man's attack caused the purple soul-devouring Beast King to reveal shock in its eyes. It immediately let out a sharp cry, and the purple light on its body swelled, becoming more and more intense. Its charging figure came to an abrupt halt. Instead of advancing, it retreated, turning into an afterimage. It used its maximum speed to escape into the distance. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a small black, about to disappear into the void. With the soul-devouring Beast King's strength at the peak of the Divine King, it did possess some ability to flee from primordial realm experts. However, the 8 other soul-devouring beasts that also possessed the same level of battle prowess as the Divine King did not possess the same ability. They were all struck by the terrifying energy from the old man with the laws of the primordial realm, and they died. Hee, soul-devouring Beast King. Since old man has encountered you, how can I let you escape? The old man let out a cold laugh. He opened his palm, and a fist-sized seal appeared in his hand. Then he threw the seal in his hand out. The seal broke free from the elder's palm and instantly expanded to a size of 10,000 feet in the air. It shattered the void and gave off a destructive aura as it chased after the Soul-Eater Beast King. Wherever it passed, ripples appeared in the space. On the other side, Jianshin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong stopped as well. They watched the old man deal with the soul-devouring Beast King sternly as they stared at the silver-white spatial battleship in the distance. Looking at the size of the spatial battleship, it should belong to a sect or clan, and there's a primordial realm expert watching over it. It's best if we don't come into contact with them too much. Let's go, said Jianqin. Although he was very tempted to go up and ask where he was right now, the appearance of the primordial realm expert made him dismiss that thought. Kea naturally did not raise any objections to Jianqin's suggestion, and seeing how Kea had no objections, Master Chanlong agreed with Jianqin after a moment's hesitation. Please wait a moment, my 3 friends. However, at this moment, a voice rang out from behind. The middle-aged man on the spatial battleship arrived before Jianqin, Master Chanlong, and clasped his fist with a smile. I come from the Yun family of the Sky Empire of the profound Thunderplane. My name is Yun Lianqing. Since you've appeared here, you must be going to Poseidon Palace as well. Jianqin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong frowned. They were filled with doubt. What kind of place was Poseidon Palace? Why did he think that the 3 of them were going to Poseidon Palace as soon as he saw them? Yun Lianqing paused. Seeing how Jianqin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong had no intentions of speaking, he continued, however, the region we're in is extremely far away from the Hinyu Plain, where Poseidon Palace is located. Without a spatial battleship, it'll take several decades to get to the Hinyu Plain, even with the speed of a divine king. You don't seem to have a spatial battleship, so if you don't mind, please board the spatial battleship of our Yun family. Our spatial battleship just happens to be able to take you along. Yun Lianqing spoke extremely sincerely. He truly wanted to invite Jianqin, Master Chanlong, and Master Chanlong because he had clearly witnessed their strength from the spatial battleship. It was exactly because of this that he did not put on any airs when he faced Jianqin and the other over-gods with his cultivation as a mid-divine king. He treated them as equals. You've misunderstood, fellow Yin. We're not going to Poseidon Palace. We've just lost our way due to the attacks of a powerful space beast. If it's convenient for you, please tell us where the plane closest to us is. Jianqin clasped his fist. Yun Lianqing was immediately stunned when he heard that. Ha ha ha! It's all thanks to the 3 of you that old man was able to capture the soul-devouring Beast King this time. If it weren't for the fact that you drew out the soul-devouring Beast King, and if it weren't for the fact that you were attacked by the soul-devouring Beast King, we probably wouldn't have known that a tiny meteor was hiding a soul-devouring Beast King. At this moment, the brown-robed old man arrived with a flushed face. He laughed heartily and seemed to be in a very good mood. The old man continued, the plane closest to where we are right now is the Hinyu Plain. With the speed of our spatial battleship, we should be able to get there in around half a year. If we don't use the spatial battleship, even with the Divine King's speed, it'll probably take several decades, or even over 100 years to reach the Hinyu Plain. That's under the premise that we don't come across any attacks from space beasts along the way, or it'll take even longer. Since you've become lost in outer space and you don't have a spatial battleship with you, why don't you board the spatial battleship of our Yun family? If that's the case, we'll just be disturbing you for a while. After a short moment of consideration, Jianqin agreed in the end. In reality, Jianqin had always been worried about boarding the spatial battleship of the Yun family, as the talent and battle prowess he and Kea had displayed was just too shocking. He believed that the people of the Yun family had seen this clearly when he fought the soul-devouring beast. Many large organizations would try everything they could to rope in supreme prodigies with such battle prowess and nurture them into a sharp sword. If they failed to rope them in, some organizations would even use extreme methods. As a result, there would always be a certain amount of risk for Jianqin if he boarded the spatial battleship of the Yun family. However, their primordial realm expert had already appeared. If the Yun family really did have ill intentions towards them, the 3 of them would not be able to flee at all before a primordial realm expert. If that was the case, they would be better off being open about it and boarding the spatial battleship of the Yun plane boldly. If they did not have any ill intentions, that would naturally be for the best. It would save them several decades of travel time. If they really did have ill intentions, they would be able to deal with them before falling out with the Yun family. After a simple introduction, they boarded the spatial battleship that was only several hundred meters long. The great elder of the Yun family had already left, leaving behind only Yun Lianqing to receive Jianqin and the others. Chapter 2029. A clarification. I made a mistake about the origins of the Yun family in the previous chapter. The Yun family came from the sky empire of the southern region of the profound Thunder Plain, but due to a moment of carelessness, I wrote it as the Hinyu Plain. The Hinyu Plain is where the Tsang Poseidon Palace is located. I've already corrected the previous mistakes. Jianchen could not help but become slightly curious about the Tsang Poseidon Palace when he heard about it again. Fellow Yin, this is the first time the three of us have come to this place, and it's also the first time we've heard about the Tsang Poseidon Palace. May I ask what kind of place the Tsang Poseidon Palace is for you to place so much importance on it? Jianqin clasped his fist and asked. Yun Lianqing was immediately surprised when he heard that the three of them had no idea about the Tsang Poseidon Palace. However, he seemed to realize something soon afterwards, and he immediately became excited. He looked at Jianqin and Kea with shining eyes and said, "Since you don't know about the Tsang Poseidon Palace, allow me to explain the origins of the Tsang Poseidon Palace to you." Yun Lianqing paused when he reached there. He looked at the vast outer space outside the spatial battleship and sank into his memories. After sorting out his thoughts, he said, "The Tsang Poseidon Palace has existed for a very long time, far longer than the history of our Yun family. As a result, our Yun family's understanding of the Tsang Poseidon Palace comes from various sources in the Saints' world or from some rumors. There's an extremely ancient legend in the Saints' world that there's an extremely powerful sect on the Hinyu Plain. The sect is called the Taoist sect of Neptunia. The Taoist sect of Neptunia is extremely powerful. Not only do they have several tens of millions of disciples, but they also have 4 supreme experts. These 4 supreme experts are all grand primes, and they are known as the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. Yun Lianqing's gaze changed. Even with his mental fortitude as a god king, he struggled to remain calm at that moment. His breathing became rather heavy as undisguised admiration and yearning filled his eyes. He sighed. Grand primes are existences who stand at the very apex of the saints' world. People like them can destroy eternal empires and sects with a wave of their hand. Yet there are actually 4 grand primes. That's more than enough to show just how terrifying the Taoist sect of Neptunia was in the past. A sect actually has 4 grand primes. The Taoist sect of Neptunia, sure, is terrifying. Jianqin could not help but sigh in amazement when he heard that. The Taoist sect of Neptunia, the Taoist sect of Neptunia. Master Chanlong murmured to himself as he sank into his thoughts. For some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity when he heard the Taoist sect of Neptunia. He seemed to have heard of it before, but he was unable to recall where. That's not all. There's also a rumor that has been passed down for several million years in the saints' world. It's said that one of the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia has already reached the peak of Grand Prime, only a step away from Grand Exalt. He's known as one of the most powerful people below Grand Exalt in the saints' world. Yun Lianqing sighed in amazement. His emotions fluctuated violently. With his divine king's level of cultivation, he struggled to remain calm when talking about such supreme figures. Fellow Yin, it looks like the Taoist sect of Neptunia is connected to the Poseidon Palace, right? Jianqin asked curiously. Yun Lianqing nodded. That's right. They are indeed connected because the Poseidon Palace is the supreme divine hall of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. At the same time, it's the only remnant of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. Jianqin was surprised. He asked, remnant? Has the Taoist sect of Neptunia been destroyed? Sigh. Yun Lianqing let out a long sigh. Yeah, they've been destroyed. Such a powerful Taoist sect of Neptunia has actually been destroyed. Moreover, it's said that they were destroyed by an unimaginably terrifying existence. It's just unbelievable. Jianqin gasped. The Taoist sect of Neptunia had 4 grand primes, and one of them was even known as one of the most powerful people below Grand Exalt. Such a powerful group had actually been destroyed by a single person. It was just far too shocking. Yun Lianqing continued, "You probably think that the Taoist sect of Neptunia was destroyed by the legendary Grand Exalts of our saints' world. But that's not the case. There's always been an unchanging legend that the person who destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia was not a Grand Exalt of our saints' world. Instead, it was a supreme expert from another world." Jianqin shivered inside when he heard that. A supreme expert from another world immediately made him think of the immortals' world. This was because only the immortals' world possessed such strength. After all, the immortals' world had 5 grand exalts, and they had even fought a war against the saints' world. Several grand exalts had died. The immortals' world, Jianqin thought, although he was in the saints' world, he was technically a person of the immortals' world. This was because his legacy came from the immortals' world, and the sword spirits belonged to the immortals' world as well. Yun Lianqing sucked in a deep breath and said, "Our Yun family has only existed for around 1,000,000 years, so our heritage is not particularly deep. As a result, we don't know a lot of information, so we naturally have no way of confirming the authenticity of the rumor. It's only rumor that the other world is a place called the immortals' world. It's said that the immortals' world is an extremely powerful major world. It's not much weaker than our saints' world. And the expert who destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia was a terrifying existence called the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Even when the Taoist sect of Neptunia used all their strength, they were not the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's opponent." Qianlong became even more confused when he heard about the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. He also found the name to be rather familiar for some reason. It was not just him. Even the trapped soul in his space ring felt the same. Who's the Samsaric Immortal Exalt? Have I seen him in the past? No, I've never seen him before, nor have I heard of him. The trapped soul murmured inside. Yun Lianqing continued, "This is because the Samsaric Immortal Exalt strength is no weaker than the Grand Exalts of our saints' world. He's also an existence that has transformed into the heavenly ways. He's extremely terrifying. Before the Taoist sect of Neptunia was destroyed, all the experts of the sect hid in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. However, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt controlled the power of samsara and the heavenly ways, reversing yin and yang. He forcefully sent all the experts hiding in the sect into samsara. However, it was still up to the Samsaric Immortal Exalt to decide whether they were reincarnated or not. As a result, although everyone in the Taoist sect of Neptunia was sent into samsara, none of them actually had the chance to reincarnate. They were all wiped out. However, before the experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia died, they left their legacies in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. It said that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt originally wanted to destroy the Neptunian Poseidon Palace, but a Grand Exalt of our saints' world appeared. From then onwards, the Neptunian Poseidon Palace remained. Due to the formations, it would only open once every 10,000 years, and because there were legacies left behind by many experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia, it became a place for cultivators of the saints' world to seek fortune. Yun Lianqing looked at Jianqin and the others and said, "Do you know the origins of the Neptunian Poseidon Palace now?" Jianqin exhaled deeply and said, "I never thought that the Neptunian Poseidon Palace would have gone through something like this. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt strength is truly astonishing. He actually destroyed a powerful sect like the Taoist sect of Neptunia so easily all by himself. Grand Exalts are actually so powerful and terrifying. Moreover, the Grand Exalt of the saints' world only appeared after the Samsaric Immortal Exalt destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia. That's how short it has been since the Samsaric Immortal Exalt destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia." Jianqin slowly calmed down. He stared at Yun Lianqing with shining eyes and asked indifferently, "Fellow Yin, when you first saw us, you thought we were going to the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. Is the Neptunian Poseidon Palace about to open again? Chapter 2030. Jianqin frowned when he heard that. He said, "Fellow Yin, may I ask how you obtained the Neptunian medallion? Also, the Poseidon Palace has existed for over 1,000,000 years, and it only opens once every 10,000 years. In other words, the Neptunian Poseidon Palace has opened many times over the years. Even if there are legacies in there probably aren't many left." Yun Lianqing nodded slightly and said, "The Neptunian medallion is actually the disciple medallion of the Taoist sect of Neptunian. The great elders of the sect were forced into dire straits by the samsaric immortal exalt of the immortal's world in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. Before they died, they cast down a powerful formation together and tossed a portion of the sect's medallion to various places in the saint's world. If you want to obtain one, you have to rely on your own luck and strength. Of course, a few Neptunian medallions ended up in various auction houses before being purchased by various large organizations at exorbitant prices. Even our Yun family struggled to afford such a price." Yun Lianqing stared at Jianqin deeply and said with deep meaning, "Our Yun family also possesses a Neptunian medallion. A single Neptunian medallion is enough for 20 people to enter. If you're interested in the Poseidon Palace, I can make the decision to give you 3 spots." "Of course. Don't worry, Brother Jianqin. Although the Poseidon Palace has opened many times and many people have obtained great fortune and legacies from the Poseidon Palace, there are still many legacies and riches that have yet to be found. At the very least, only one of the legacies left behind by the 4 grand primes of the Taoist sect of Neptunian has been taken away in the past 1,000,000 years. There are still 3 left in the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. As long as your cultivation doesn't surpass the Divine King's, you can enter the Neptunian Poseidon Palace. Coupled with the temptation of the palace, won't there be many Divine King experts who will enter once the palace opens? There might even be quite a few late Divine Kings. How are we supposed to contend against a group of Divine Kings with our mere cultivation as over-gods?" Kea frowned. She and Jianqin were very powerful, but it would be very difficult for them to deal with mid-Divine King experts if they fought alone. Although the 3 of them had killed a late Divine King space beast in outer space, space beasts were not intelligent. They were nowhere close to the crafty, battle-hardened Divine King experts, so dealing with them would naturally be much easier than dealing with cultivators of the same level unless they encountered space beasts with particularly powerful bloodlines. Yun Lianqing smiled. "You don't have to worry about that. Although the Poseidon Palace is the main battlefield of the Divine King, basically all the Divine King experts have come for the legacies of the ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunian. Overgods can still seek out their own fortuitous encounters in the side halls." Jianqin became rather interested when he heard that. He did not care about the legacies of the Taoist sect of Neptunian. This was because he cultivated the chaotic body. Even if he obtained a Grand Prime's legacy, it would not be of much use to him. However, the Taoist sect of Neptunian was a super sect in the past, after all. They should have quite a lot of 5-colored divine crystals. What Jianqin lacked the most right now were 5-colored divine crystals. Once he had sufficient 5-colored divine crystals, he could use teleportation formations to find his sister, Mingdong and Shangguan Mu, who had been taken to the Taoist sect of divine sound on the Skyfire plane. Jianqin did not plan on going to Taita on the Godnigma plane before he was powerful enough. His sister had Shui Yunlan, and if everything went as expected, Mingdong should be in the Nata Grand Prime's heavenly palace of Bishing. What he truly worried about was Shangguan Mu. After asking for the opinions of Kea and Master Chanlong secretly, Jianqin said firmly, "Fellow Yin, I believe you won't be giving us 3 spots to enter the Poseidon Palace for no reason. Tell me your conditions." Yun Lianqing chuckled aloud. "Brother Jianqin really is straightforward. If that's the case, I'll be straightforward. My request is very simple. I just hope that Brother Jianqin can protect the young lady of the Yun family for a year after you enter the Poseidon Palace. During that year, do your best to assist the young lady of the Yun family in obtaining any of the legacies in there. The Poseidon Palace will only close once every 10 years, so the remaining 9 years should be enough for you to search for your own fortuitous encounters. Although our Yun family has sent a divine king into the Poseidon Palace this time, their main objective is to obtain the legacies in the main hall. As a result, they won't be able to spare any extra people to protect the young lady of the Yun family. All right, we promise you. Jianqin agreed extremely straightforwardly. Using a year of 10 years to protect the young lady of the Yun family in exchange for a spot to enter the Poseidon Palace was not a loss to him. In another room on the spaceship of the Yun family, the room was mainly decorated in pink. The entire space was filled with a faint fragrance, so people could tell with a single glance that the person living there was definitely a woman. What? Uncle Qing, you casually found 3 unidentified people in the starry sky to act as my guards? And you want to replace Hua Qi, Tang Lian, and Zhou Shaoqian? In this room, a woman wearing a pink dress was standing there. She looked to be no more than 20 years old. Her skin was as white as snow, and she had bright eyes and white teeth. She was quite beautiful. At this moment, her eyes were wide open as she stared at Yun Lianqing, who was standing in front of her with a shocked expression. She was the young lady of the Yun family, Yun Exan. But very soon, anger appeared on Yun Exan's face. She said firmly, "No, I don't agree. Hua, Qi, Tang Lian, and Zhou Shaoqian were the 3 of them that I convinced after so much effort to go to the Neptunian Divine Palace as my guards. How can you change them just like that?" Yun Lianqing said, "Exan, Uncle Qing knows you're on good terms with the 3 of them. At the same time, I know you spent a great deal of effort to convince your father to take the 3 of them to the Poseidon Palace. However, the Poseidon Palace is far too dangerous. With Hua, Qi, Tang Lian, and Zhou Xiaoqian's strength, it's not enough to protect you. However, the 3 people Uncle Qing has found for you are all extremely powerful. They're supreme overgods who have made it onto the overgods plaque. So what if they're supreme overgods on the overgods plaque? Could a peerless chief god be invincible in there? When the Poseidon Palace opens, aren't there a large number of supreme overgods on the overgods plaque and divine kings who sit on the divine king's throne taking part? Moreover, I'm only going to the Poseidon Palace for training. It's not like I'm actually going to compete for some legacy. Those so-called legacies will naturally be fought over by the divine kings in the clan. What does it have to do with me? Why should I replace my guards?" Yun Exion's beautiful face was filled with dissatisfaction and anger. "Exion, you can't change this because the Great Elder has already agreed to it. If you insist on not accepting it, you can only go to the Great Elder yourself." Yun Lianqing smiled faintly. Yun Exion's face changed when she heard that. Although her status in the Yun family was not low, she knew extremely well that there was nothing she could do to the Great Elder, who even her father had to show respect to. P.S. Please listen to Xiaoyao's prestige message. Once there are any updates or changes in the future, Xiaoyao will inform you through prestige message. Search. Xingxingxiao 110. It was not complicated. It was Xinxing Xiaoyao's pen name and a police number. Chapter 2031. In the cold and dark endless void, a silver-white light flashed past. It sped through the void at a speed many times faster than lightning. It was a spaceship that was only several hundred meters wide. Jianqin currently sat on a comfortable, soft bed in a quiet cabin within the spaceship. He checked his harvest from the space beasts he had hunted in the past few days. There are over 30 overgod crystal cores and 8 divine king crystal cores. Jianqin murmured inside. These crystal cores were everything he had obtained since he had set foot in outer space. Of course, the number of space beasts that had died to their hands far exceeded that. However, Not all of the crystal cores belonged to him. Kea and Master Chanlong each had a portion. Coupled with the fact that many special species of space beasts did not possess crystal cores, Jianqin and the others had only obtained a few crystal cores even though they had killed an extremely large number of space beasts. The group of soul-devouring beasts they had come across earlier was a species that did not possess crystal cores. Compared to the magic cores of the magical beasts, the energy cores of these space beasts are crystallized from pure energy. However, there is still a clear difference between the two. The energy within the crystal cores of space beasts is much more chaotic and unstable. As a result, refining the crystal cores of space beasts is much more difficult than refining monster cores. However, I don't need to worry about this at all with the chaotic body I cultivate. Absorbing the crystal cores of space beasts to increase my cultivation will leave behind problems that pose no threat to me at all, Jianqin thought. At the same time, he felt rather helpless. In the past, his comprehension of the laws of the sword was far greater than his cultivation. The only thing he lacked was a large number of cultivation resources. But now he had already prepared all the cultivation resources he needed to break through to the next layer of the chaotic body. Unfortunately, he never made another breakthrough with his comprehension of the laws of the sword. He was restricted by his cultivation, so he struggled to break through to the next layer of the chaotic body. I hope I can reach the major achievement of Sword Spirit in Poseidon Palace this time. I won't be able to handle the battles that are led by the Divine King with my current cultivation as a late Divine King. If I fight alone, Mid-Divine King will be my limit. Moreover, I'm talking about regular Mid-Divine Kings. Only by reaching the major achievement of Sword Spirit and the 12th layer of the chaotic body will I possess the strength to contend against late Divine King. Jianqin looked at the space outside through the small window of the cabin. He felt some anticipation. He anticipated the trip to Poseidon Palace. At this moment, a powerful presence appeared from the cabin beside Jianqin's. Jianqin was slightly surprised when he sensed the presence, but his lips soon curled into a faint smile. He stood up and walked out. The two cabins to the left and right of Jianqin were occupied by Kea and Chanlong, respectively. The presence came from Chanlong's cabin. However, the strength of the presence had already surpassed over God's. It had reached the level of Divine King. Master Chanlong had actually broken through at that moment, formally becoming a Divine King. Very soon, Yun Lianqing arrived as well. He congratulated Chanlong on becoming a Divine King with Jianqin and Kea. Yun Lianqing, who are they? At this moment, a rather cold voice rang out. A young man who seemed to be in his 20s and wore luxurious robes embroidered with golden threads walked over from afar. 6 people of varying ages followed behind the young man. However, without any exception, all of them had reached the level of Divine King. They were all the peak forces of the Yun family. Now that the Yun family had obtained the Neptunian medallion, they had basically sent out all the peak forces in the clan in order to seek fortune in the Neptunian Divine Palace and forge a new future for the Yun family. There were over a dozen God Kings. If it were not for the fact that the Yun family did not have any extra Divine King experts, they would have been tempted to fill up all 20 spots with Divine King experts. Chanlong's breakthrough to the level of Divine King alarmed some of the experts of the Yun family who were cultivating in the spatial battleship. Yun Lianqing immediately introduced Jianqin and the others. He emphasized that Jianqin and Kea were both supreme overgods on the overgods plaque. Jianqin? Kea? Yun Weifeng frowned. He studied Jianqin and Kea with a sharp gaze and said sternly, I remember all the names of the 3,000 supreme overgods on the overgods plaque clearly. I don't think your names are on there. Before Jianqin could reply, Yun Weifeng looked at Yun Lianqing again. He frowned and said with some displeasure, Yun Lianqing, although our Yun family still has a few empty spots for the Neptunian medallion and we've decided to send a few overgods in, They have to be from our Yun family. How can you just give a spot to an outsider, so casually? Moreover, the reason is so laughable. Do you really believe that a random person who says they're supreme over God on the over gods plaque is real? Humph. Their names aren't on the over gods plaque at all. Yun Lianqing's face suddenly sank. He called out, Yun Weifeng, Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong are our esteemed guests. How can you speak to our esteemed guests like that? Moreover, I didn't make this decision on my own. The great elder personally approved it. If you have any doubts, feel free to find the great elder. Yun Weifeng immediately became filled with respect when he heard the great elder. He glanced at Jianqin and Kea deeply before turning around and leaving without saying anything else. After Yun Weifeng left with the people behind him, Yun Lianqing immediately smiled. He said apologetically, fellow Jianqin, fellow Kea, I hope you don't mind what just happened. Jianqin smiled freely. He did not take it to heart at all. After exchanging some pleasantries with Yun Lianqing, they both left. The rest of the journey was peaceful. Although there were many people on the spatial battleship of the Yun family, basically everyone cultivated as they traveled through outer space. They adjusted themselves to their peak condition so that they could deal with the upcoming battle. As a result, Jianqin, Yun Lianqing, and Chanlong were all fine. They were not disturbed by anyone. We've arrived at the Poseidon Palace. At this moment, the great elder's voice rang through the entire spatial battleship. Jianqin slowly opened his eyes and made his way out of the room. He arrived on the deck with Kea and Chanlong. Chapter 2032. As soon as Jianqin's group stepped onto the deck, the 20 or so members of the Yun family all turned their heads. Their gazes gathered on Jianqin's group. Only Yun Lianqing treated Jianqin's group in an extremely friendly manner. He immediately clasped his hands towards Jianqin's group with a smile. The kindness and friendliness he expressed came from the bottom of his heart. There was no pretense at all. As for the other members of the Yun family, around half of them looked at Jianqin's group with hostility, led by Yun Weifeng. The remaining half remained cold and did not change at all. They seemed to be superior as they expressionlessly studied Jianqin's group. Although this was the first time many of them had seen Jianqin's group, they had already learned of the existence of Jianqin's group several months ago. Moreover, they had taken up 3 of the spots from the Yun family to Tsang Poseidon Palace. Although this had displeased quite a few members of the Yun family, they could only deeply suppress their displeasure after learning that the matter had been approved by the great elder. However, when the pretty young lady of the Yun family in a pink dress saw Jianqin's group arrive, her phoenix-like eyes immediately spat out flames of fury. She placed her hands on her hips and cried out, As my guards, why have you come so late? Since you're a guard, you need to understand your duties as a guard. However, from what I see, the 3 of you don't seem to know what you're supposed to do as a guard or what you need to pay attention to. Yunqin's voice became louder and louder as her face became colder and colder. In the end, she looked at Jianqin's group in displeasure and pointed at them. She was unable to hide her anger as she said, Uncle Qing, look at what kind of guards you found for me. They don't have any self-awareness at all. How can the 3 of them compare to Hua Qi, Tang Lian, and Zhou Shaoqian? Jianqin's face immediately darkened when the young lady of the Yun family openly criticized Jianqin's group, as well as directly describing them as her guards. His face sank slightly as he glared at Yunqin. Just when he was about to scold her, Jianqin's voice rang out. You must be the young lady of the Yun family, Yunqin. Miss Yunqin, I am Jianqin. I need to reiterate what you've just said so that you won't misunderstand, Miss Yunqin. Jianqin's voice was firm and forceful. He calmly made his way forward with Kea and Chanlong. Even though over a dozen divine king realm experts of the Yun family gathered before them, Jianqin's group did not show any fear at all. After pausing, Jianqin continued, Miss Yunqin, firstly, the 3 of us are not your guards. You have no right to interfere with our actions. Secondly, according to our agreement, the three of us will only protect you after we enter the Tsang Poseidon Palace. As a result, we have no obligation to protect you before we enter the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Even after we enter the Tsang Poseidon Palace, the three of us will only be protecting you for a year. If we come across any legacies, we'll obviously do everything we can to help you obtain them. After a year, we won't owe each other anything. Apart from Yun Lianqing, all the people of the Yun family became rather stunned when they heard Jianqin's words. They stared at Jianqin blankly as they felt disbelief. In the past, whenever a master god faced them, which one of them didn't act respectfully and speak humbly to them? However, the puny overgod before them showed no fear at all before so many divine king experts of the Yun family. Instead, he even placed himself on the same level as them and tried to negotiate with them. This was the first time they had seen such a bold overgod. You're actually trying to negotiate with our Yun family. Your courage is commendable, but I wonder if you have the right to negotiate with our Yun family. A young man who seemed to be in his 30s sneered from the crowd. A vicious light flickered through his eyes, and he took a step forward, appearing before Jianqin as if he had teleported. He smiled coldly and directly slapped towards Jianqin's face. Yun Shan, stop. Yun Lianqing's face suddenly changed, and he called out coldly. He had never thought that Yun Shan would actually attack Jianqin. He wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. Behind him, none of the divine kings of the Yun family moved to stop him, including Yun Weifeng. A few of the divine kings of the Yun family sneered mockingly. If Jianqin was a divine king, they would not have reacted like this if he tried to negotiate with their Yun family. However, he was only an overgod, yet he dared to negotiate with their Yun family. Moreover, he showed no respect towards them, divine king experts. This immediately angered many people. They were naturally happy to see Yun Shan take action now. As a matter of fact, some of them had already locked onto Qianlong. Qianlong was the only divine king among them. Although he had only broken through recently, he was clearly enough to attract their attention. If Qianlong took action, they would take action as well, stopping Master Qianlong from saving Jianqin. However, to their surprise, Qianlong, the only person they believed to have a chance at stopping Yun Shan, did not show any intentions of taking action. Instead, he smiled mysteriously, which confused them. Yun Shan's actions made Jianqin's face immediately turn cold. His indifferent gaze became extremely sharp at that moment as well. He did not dodge Yun Shan's attack. Instead, he clenched his hand into a fist and struck out with the power of the laws of the sword and chaotic force, striking Yun Shan's palm with lightning speed. Bang! The fist and palm collided, producing a heavy sound. Yun Shan only felt a powerful force strike his right hand, causing a heart-wrenching pain to be transmitted from his right arm. Immediately, he could not help but let out a muffled groan. His entire right arm had lost all feeling. His right hand had been reduced to a bloody mess. His entire right arm drooped powerlessly. Vaguely, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Although Yun Shan was a divine king, he was only an early divine king. Even if he used his full strength, he would not be Jianqin's opponent. Coupled with the fact that he had underestimated Jianqin and still treated Jianqin as a regular overgod, he did not use his full strength. As a result, he suffered greatly from the first clash. Aside from Yun Lianqing, who knew Jianqin's strength, all the people of the Yun family who had witnessed all of this were surprised. Clearly, they struggled to accept this outcome. The young lady of the Yun family, Yun Xin, was stunned as well. She had heard from Uncle Qing that Jianqin was a supreme overgod on the overgod's plaque, but she did not take it seriously. This was because even the supreme overgods on the overgod's plaque, apart from those who ranked in the top 10, were still very far away from the divine king. However, she had never thought that Jianqin would actually be so powerful. He had made Yun Shan an early divine king, suffer greatly from a single clash. Chapter 2033. Yun Weifeng was just a mere over-god. Yet he had managed to injure a mighty divine king like this in an open battle. Moreover, Yun Weifeng was completely unscathed. This was an unerasable humiliation to him. How dare you? Yun Weifeng was immediately infuriated. A powerful presence radiated from him, directly enveloping Jianqin. The presence was so powerful that it had clearly reached the late divine king. Yun Weifeng was one of the only two late divine kings in the entire Yun family. He was one of the only two late divine king experts. Jianqin became stern. A late divine king was not someone he could deal with right now. He could only fend off the late divine king if he worked together with Kea, Chanlong, and the others. If Chanlong had not broken through, Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong would have been able to match regular late divine king experts if they worked together. Now that Chanlong had become a divine king, his strength had increased drastically. Jianqin was extremely confident that they could kill late divine king experts if they worked together. Of course, that was only if the late divine king did not possess battle prowess far greater than other prodigies of the same level. He was not a divine king with heaven-defying battle prowess. Enough! At this moment, a cold snort rang out. The great elder of the Yun family appeared on the deck silently. He glared at Yun Weifeng. Under the piercing gaze of the grand elder, Yun Weifeng's heart shuddered, as the aura that blotted the skies instantly crumbled. Immediately he bowed respectfully and greeted, "Greetings, Grand Elder!" "Greetings, Great Elder!" Afterwards, all the people of the Yun family bowed politely towards the old man. Their voices were filled with respect from the bottom of their hearts. "Greetings, Senior." Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong clasped their hands as well. The Grand Elder of the Yun family turned his head to look at Jianqin and the other two, and said in an old but vigorous voice, "My three little friends, we of the Yun family have offended many people. I hope you don't take offense." "Senior, what are you saying? This is just a small misunderstanding," Jianqin said. The great elder of the Yun family smiled amiably. He looked at the people of the Yun family and said, "The three young friends will be going in with you on this trip to Poseidon Palace. Wait in Poseidon Palace. If you discover that Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong are in danger, you have to do your best to save them. Do you understand?" "Yes, Grand Elder." The people of the Yun family all looked at Jianqin with mixed feelings. Since the great elder had said that they would not dare to be rude to Jianqin and the others on the warship, no matter what, Jianqin understood that the great elder of the Yun family was actually saying this for the three of them to hear. It was just words to maintain their relationship on the surface, so they could not be taken seriously. After all, no one outside knew about everything that happened in Poseidon Palace. Once they entered Poseidon Palace, they would be extremely lucky if they did not kick them while they were down, let alone rely on the people of the Yun family to help them. The great elder's voice rang out once again. "Although Poseidon Palace opens once every 10,000 years, there's a difference of a few months or even a few years each time. You'll have to wait for Poseidon Palace to open on the warship. Do not disembark. Organizations of various sizes from the surrounding planes have gathered in this region of space. Many of them are forces that our Yun family can't afford to offend, so you can't cause any trouble, let alone meddle in other people's business. Old Man is going to the Hinyu plane to meet up with an old friend, so he won't be able to look after you for a while." With that, the great elder of the Yun family left the warship, vanishing into the vast cosmos in the blink of an eye. "We've arrived at Poseidon Palace." Just like that, Jianqin was stunned as he watched the great elder of the Yun family disappear. He looked around and discovered that they were still in outer space. There was no sign of the divine palace at all. Brother Jianqin, you might not know, but when the Taoist sect of Neptunia still existed, the palace of Poseidon Palace did indeed stand on the Hinyu plain. However, When the grand exalt of another world destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia, the palace of Poseidon Palace was struck into outer space from the Hinyu plane. The space we're in right now is roughly where the palace of Poseidon Palace is. Seeing Jianqin's doubts, Yun Lianqing immediately explained to Jianqin, due to formations, the palace of Poseidon Palace has always been hidden in outer space. It's impossible for outsiders to find its exact location. It'll only reveal itself when it opens. Jianqin came to a realization. He slowly made his way to the front of the ship and stood there. His vision suddenly opened up, and he immediately felt like he could see the entire cosmos with a single glance. However, Jianqin's eyes narrowed soon afterwards. He suddenly looked into the distance and discovered that there were actually many spaceships hovering in outer space. Every single spaceship was extremely far away from each other. Even with Jianqin's soul at the level of the Divine King, he was unable to reach the spaceships at all. As a matter of fact, Jianqin could even vaguely make out a few figures in the space there. However, due to the fact that they were just too far away, he could only barely make out a blurry figure with his eyesight. Even further away, Jianqin discovered a palm-sized piece of land that hovered silently in outer space. He could clearly see a few rivers that extended across it, dividing the piece of land. Jianqin knew that this was the Hinyu Plain, one of the 49 great plains of the Saints' world. However, as it was just too far away, the Hinyu Plain was only the size of a palm in his eyes. However, to Jianqin's surprise, the Hinyu Plain was 2 or 3 times larger than the Cloud Plain. Afterwards, Jianqin and the Divine King of the Yun family began to wait. They waited for the palace of Poseidon Palace to open. Due to Jianqin's conflict with Yun Shan, the Divine King of the Yun family understood his strength. As a result, the Divine King of the Yun family did not continue to provoke Jianqin's group. Clearly, they had already begun to accept Jianqin. Even the young lady of the Yun family, Yunxin, shut her mouth obediently. However, she had spent a great deal of effort to convince her father to allow her to bring Hua Qi, Tang Lian, and Zhou Shaoqian into the palace of Poseidon Palace. Now that they had been replaced by Jianqin's group, she was still unhappy. She naturally did not have a good impression of Jianqin's group. Although it could be said that Jianqin had gained a firm foothold here, everyone from the Yun family maintained their distance from him aside from Yun Lianqing. They did not come into contact with him or converse with him. Jianqin did not care about this at all. After casting down a simple formation with Kea and Chanlong, he sat down on the deck and continued to comprehend the laws of the sword. I'll let you be complacent. Once we enter the palace of Poseidon Palace, I'd like to see if you're still so arrogant. Yunxin glared at Jianqin's group of 3 and snorted coldly inside. In the blink of an eye, Jianqin had already waited there for 3 months. During those 3 months, he still did not break through with the laws of the sword. Instead, he saw battles erupt in outer space one after another. They were extremely intense, and there were even infinite primes who took part. More and more people gathered in outer space now. Just the spaceships in outer space amounted to over 1,000, and there were even more people seated there. At this moment, Jianqin suddenly opened his eyes. The light in his eyes flickered as he stared at the space before him. At the same time, Kea and Chanlong seemed to sense something as well. They opened their eyes at the same time as Jianqin. Kea said softly, "The palace of Poseidon Palace is about to open." With that, an extremely terrifying ripple of energy suddenly erupted from outer space with a tremendous pressure. Like a tsunami, it spread out in all directions with an overwhelming force. The entire region of space surged with the appearance of this terrifying energy, producing rings of spatial ripples. All of a sudden, the space was torn apart and a huge spatial crack appeared. Within the spatial crack, a huge divine hall that was hundreds of thousands of feet long and tens of thousands of feet tall gradually emerged. Chapter 2034. The huge divine hall hovered in outer space. The pressure it gave off was so great that not only did it strike fear into the hearts of all the experts gathered there, but it also made the entire region of space tremble and tremble. It was as if the divine temple had already surpassed the starry sky. Its appearance had directly suppressed the entire world. It had an indescribable sense of supremacy. The Poseidon Palace has appeared. After 10,000 years, we've finally seen the Poseidon Palace again. I wonder if the remaining 3 Grand Prime's legacies will choose a master when the Poseidon Palace opens this time. With the appearance of the Poseidon Palace, discussions immediately broke out in the region of space. Many people who were about to enter the Poseidon Palace burned with desire. They rubbed their palms together as battle intent surged from them. The divine kings of the Yun family stared at the Poseidon Palace on the spaceship of the Yun family as well. All of them were eager to try. They were filled with anticipation towards the various legacies in the Poseidon Palace. Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong stared at the colossal Poseidon Palace as well. Unlike the divine kings of the Yun family, the 3 of them were stern. Perhaps the Neptunian divine palace was a place to seek fortune in the eyes of others, but to the 3 of them, it was a cruel battlefield of life and death apart from a place to seek fortune. With a flash, the great elder of the Yun family appeared before everyone. He stared at the palace deeply and said with his back to everyone, "The Poseidon Palace has opened. Prepare to enter. I've already told you what I need to tell you, so old man won't repeat it." The great elder of the Yun family turned around and looked at everyone sternly. He said, "You are the hope of the Yun family, as well as the future of the Yun family. Remember, you have to make it out of the Poseidon Palace alive. Old man will await your triumphant return here. Don't worry, great elder. We will definitely do our best. We definitely won't disappoint you." The divine kings of the Yun family said together. Their voices were loud, and their presences surged. All of them were in peak condition. As for Yun Shan's arm that Jianqin had broken, it had already recovered. An injury like that was nothing to a divine king. The great elder nodded. He looked at Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong and said, "Young friends, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the juniors of our Yun family for a year." "Don't worry, senior. We will do our best to protect young Miss Yun Xan during this year." Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong clasped their fists. This was their agreement with the Yun family, and it was also the price they had to pay to enter the Poseidon Palace. Yun Xan glanced at Jianqin, Kea, and Chanlong. Her lips twitched in disdain as she thought, "Protect me? Who cares? Once we enter the Poseidon Palace, you'll see how I deal with you. Although I can't beat you, it'll be a piece of cake for me to make trouble for you." The great elder of the Yun family had already stowed away the spatial battleship. He flew through outer space with everyone, rapidly approaching the Poseidon Palace. Countless figures approached the Poseidon Palace from all directions. As more and more experts gathered, countless powerful presences gathered together, forming a terrifying pressure that filled outer space. It caused space to freeze up and suffocate people. Moreover, the closer it was to the Poseidon Palace, the more powerful the pressure would be. Even divine kings would struggle to endure it. After all, the Neptunian divine palace contained a great fortune. In particular, the strongest ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia was known to be one of the most powerful people below Grand Exalts. Even to powerful organizations with chaotic primes, the legacies he left behind were irresistibly tempting. As a result, not only were many infinite primes gathered in outer space, but there were even chaotic primes. Although there were extremely few chaotic primes on the entire plane, the Poseidon continent was a place where chaotic primes were rare. However, whenever the Poseidon Palace opened, the various organizations from the surrounding planes and planets would gather. As a result, there were many primordial realm experts outside the Poseidon Palace. Immediately, many of the overgods and divine kings who charged towards the Poseidon Palace stopped. The presence that had condensed near the Poseidon Palace was so powerful that it forced them to a halt. They dared not advance any further. Jianchen Honglian and the divine king of the Yun family followed behind the great elder of the Yun family. The great elder also radiated with the powerful presence of an infinite prime, protecting the people behind him. He led the way, charging towards the Poseidon Palace. In the surroundings, many infinite primes used their cultivation to protect the people behind them. They turned into a sharp blade, piercing through the blockade formed by the presences of the primordial realm experts, and charging towards the Poseidon Palace quickly. As a matter of fact, a few chaotic primes had already arrived before the entrance of the Poseidon Palace with the juniors of their clans. Only after personally witnessing their juniors vanish outside did they return without worry. As they approached the Poseidon Palace, the primordial realm experts secretly competed against one another. The stronger they were, the faster they would move and the faster they would approach the Poseidon Palace. Those who were weaker naturally fell to the back. Through this, Jianqin discovered that the great elder of the Yun family was average among the infinite primes present. Finally, Jianqin's group arrived at the steps to the entrance of the Poseidon Palace under the protection of the great elder of the Yun family. The other primordial realm experts also stopped there and did not advance any further. As he stood there, Jianqin could clearly sense a terrifying pulse of energy right up ahead. Looking at the great elder of the Yun family, he discovered that the great elder had become extremely stern and cautious ever since he arrived at the steps. This seriousness and caution did not come from the fact that there were too many primordial realm experts here. Instead, it came from the Poseidon Palace itself. Old man can only escort you up to here. You'll have to rely on yourselves for the rest of the journey. The Neptunian medallion will send you in, the great elder said sternly before taking out the Neptunian medallion. As soon as the Neptunian medallion appeared, it shone with dazzling blue light enveloping Jianqin's group. With a flash, Jianqin's group vanished. Only after the infinite primes had left could the divine king and over-gods continue on without the protection of the primordial realm experts. They used the Neptunian medallion to enter the Poseidon Palace. At this moment, two more figures approached the Poseidon Palace from the distance. They did not move quickly. Even when they flew as quickly as they could, they were still as slow as snails in the eyes of many people. They were two women. One of them only seemed to be in her 20s. She was beautiful, with skin as white as mutton. Her figure was graceful. Although she could not be described as alluring, she was still extremely stunning. She was only a late over-god. The other person was a little girl. She seemed to be around 15 or 16. She was pure and innocent. She constantly studied the Poseidon Palace with her large, bright eyes. It looks like the Poseidon Palace has just opened. There are still some people who haven't entered yet. Fortunately, we didn't miss the time and made it in time. The older woman exhaled deeply as she rejoiced. Sister, is this the Poseidon Palace? Why did we come all the way here? The little girl studied the Poseidon Palace and asked in confusion. The older woman looked at the little girl gently and said, "Xiaoman, this is what your mother told me before she passed away. She told me to bring you to the Poseidon Palace, no matter what." Chapter 2035. Mother. Ziyan's words uncontrollably made Xiaoman think of the extremely blurry old figure that existed in her memories. This caused Xiaoman's eyes to redden slightly as she became filled with heavy sorrow. Her mother had passed away far too early. When she had just turned 3, the figure that held her in her arms every day and gave off a deep sense of motherly love had already left her. Even though Xiaoman was only 3 when she saw her mother for the last time, she still remembered everything that happened when she was young. It was just that her memories were rather blurry. As for her father, Lil Man had never met him because her father had passed away before she was even born. There were no portraits or memories of him. Over the years, Xiaoman had only learned a little about her father from her sister Ziyun. This was because her sister Ziyun had personally seen her father. Her father had taught her everything. From Ziyin, Lil Men only knew that her father was an old man with a head full of withered hair, and her mother was an old woman with a stooped back. The two of them were both extremely old. Sister Ziyun, do you know how my father and mother died? Since my father could teach you everything, it means that he's not an ordinary person. And my mother definitely isn't an ordinary person either, right? Since they're not ordinary people, they shouldn't have died of old age, Xiaoman asked. Her eyes were red and her heart was filled with sorrow. As she grew older, she understood more and more things. Only now that she thought about it did she realize that there were many unreasonable reasons for her father and mother's deaths. Ziyun shook her head. She had no answer to a question like that, nor did she know how to answer it. This was because even she did not know the exact reason behind Xiaoman's parents' deaths. The only thing she was certain of was that Xiaoman's parents were not ordinary people. She could clearly sense that Xiaoman's parents did not possess any cultivation when they were alive, and their bodies were even weaker than regular people at times. However, everything she had learned, as well as all kinds of powerful secret methods and escape magic treasures, were all given to her by her master, who was also Xiaoman's father. Aside from her master, even her master's wife, Xiaoman's mother, had passed on many things to her. Not only did these things include the experiences and comprehension of cultivation, but they also included the dangers and cruelty of the saint's world. As a result, she gained a clear understanding of the saint's world before she had even set foot in it. This knowledge was not something an ordinary person should possess. Most importantly, Ziyun had lived with Xiaomang's parents for over 10,000 years. If he was really an ordinary person, it was impossible for him to live for so long. However, Lil Man's parents had passed away one after another. They did not have any injuries on their bodies. No matter how one looked at it, they looked like ordinary people who had reached the end of their lifespans and died of natural causes. There was no other reason to find. Xiaoman, let's enter the Poseidon Palace, Ziyun said softly. She brought Xiaoman closer to the Poseidon Palace. Then she used the blue sea medallion that Xiaoman's parents had given her and disappeared. When Jianqin reappeared, he discovered that he had appeared in a long corridor, apart from Kea, Chanlong, and the 17 people from the Yun family. There was no one else around. Brother Jianqin, the location of each blue sea medallion is not fixed. They will appear randomly on the first floor of the Poseidon Palace, Yun Lianqing said to Jianqin. He studied the surroundings. This is the first time we've come to the Poseidon Palace, but we've heard about the situation inside. The Poseidon Palace has a total of 12 floors. The higher the floor, the more powerful the legacy. It's said that the grand primes of the Taoist sect of Neptunia have all left behind their legacies on the highest floor. Yun Lianqing, all they can do is mess around in the side halls. What's the point of telling them so much? Knowing more might not be a good thing for them. Yun Weifeng snorted coldly and said emotionlessly before Yun Lianqing could finish speaking. What Yun Weifeng said is correct. If we tell them this information, who knows if they will not know the immensity of heaven and earth and run to the 12th floor. If by any chance they accidentally offend some big shot up there, wouldn't that bring trouble to our Yun family for no reason? Yun Shan snorted coldly as well. In a moment of carelessness, Jianqin had broken his arm as soon as they met. He was still brooding over this matter, so he was naturally extremely hostile towards Jianqin. Yun Lianqing thought about it and found it reasonable. Telling Jianqin and the others about this was not necessarily a good thing. With their strength, if they really were unable to resist the temptation of the Grand Prime's legacy and ran to the 12th floor recklessly, they would really be harming Jianqin and the others. As a result, Yun Lianqing was at a loss for words. All he could do was say that Jianqin left with the divine kings of the Yun family after bidding farewell. In the blink of an eye, the 16 divine kings of the Yun family vanished from the corridor. Only Jianqin, Kea, Chanlong, and the expressionless young lady of the Yun family, Yunxin, remained. Afterwards, Genshin's group and Yunxin left as well. They moved through the various places on the first floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. The interior of the Tsang Poseidon Palace was extremely large. From the outside, the Tsang Poseidon Palace was only a few 100,000 meters long. But in reality, the interior was countless times larger than it seemed from the outside. Along the way, Genshin's group discovered many corpses of people who had died here in the past, as well as many traces of damaged formations. Ever since the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been destroyed, the Tsang Poseidon Palace had been opened several hundred times. In order to obtain the legacies here, the people who had entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace in the past naturally engaged in battles of blood and fire. Many corpses had been left behind. However, at the same time, all the legacies on the first floor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been taken away. Nothing of value remained. This was because the disciples on the first floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace were not particularly powerful. It was obviously extremely easy for outsiders to obtain the legacies here, unlike the 4 ancestors of the Taoist sect of Neptunia, who had blocked out countless people. In the blink of an eye, Genshin's group of 4 had stayed on the first floor for several days. They had basically gone through the entire first floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace, but they did not come across a single person. Genshin did not find this strange. Basically, everyone who entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace knew that there was nothing on the first floor. As a result, they directly rushed to the second floor as soon as they entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace. Probably only Yunxin was in the mood to spend so much time on the first floor that was littered with corpses. Miss Yunxin, if you continue wasting your precious time here, you probably won't be able to gain anything even after a year is up. Genshin could not help but say. The Tsang Poseidon Palace would only be open for 10 years. It seemed like a very long time, but it was actually extremely short. To Genshin, wasting even half a day like Yunxin was a great loss. Is that any of your business? I just happen to like staying here. What's that got to do with you? Yunxin glanced at Genshin from the corner of her eyes. She sneered. As for the rewards, do you really think that you can obtain the legacy of an expert from the Taoist sect of Neptunia with just the few of you? Chapter 2036. Whether we fight or not is our own business. It has nothing to do with Miss Yunxin. However, Miss Yunxin, you should consider this carefully. Genshin, Chanlong, and I will only protect you for a year. If you're willing to stay on the first floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace for a year, we'll obviously be more than happy to keep you company. Kea could not help but say. She disliked Yunxin very much as well. However, the 3 of them had an agreement with Yin Lianqing to protect Yunxin for a year. As a result, the 3 of them could not stray too far from Yunxin before the year was up. You want me to stay here for a year? Humph, you're dreaming. The 3 spots to enter the Tsang Poseidon Palace from our Yun family aren't so easy to obtain. Yunxin snorted coldly and no longer stayed on the first floor. She immediately made her way to the second floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace. I'll go easy on you for now. Once we reach a place with a lot of people, you'll see how I deal with you. At that time, you'll suffer, Yunxin thought to herself as she made her way to the second floor. Although the Tsang Poseidon Palace was huge, the 4 of them arrived on the second floor before long with their speed. The second floor of the Tsang Poseidon Palace was no different from the first floor. Apart from skeletons and dried blood that could be seen everywhere, there was not a single valuable item. Clearly, after several hundred openings, all the valuable items that could be taken away from the second floor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been taken away by the people who had come before. The other cultivators who had entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace clearly had some understanding of the situation in the Divine Palace, so they had gone to higher floors long ago. As a result, only Genshin's group remained in this huge space. Afterwards, Genshin's group continued onwards. They reached the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, and the 5th floor. Only when they reached the 6th floor did they finally see some scattered figures. Yunxin's eyes immediately lit up when she saw these people. However, when she discovered that all the cultivators there were over-gods, and there were even one or two gods from time to time, she immediately frowned in displeasure. She snorted gently and said, "Go to the 7th floor." Jianqin, Kea, and Qianlong all frowned as they looked at Yunqin's back. Clearly, they already understood Yunqin's intentions. This woman will always be a problem. It'll be fine if she knows her place, but if she starts stirring up trouble for no reason and making enemies everywhere, she'll bring us quite a lot of trouble, Kea said secretly. Master, Qianlong nodded in agreement when he heard Kea's words. He said to the other two secretly, "We can't just let her do whatever she wants. There are many divine kings in the Tsang Poseidon Palace. There are even quite a few late divine kings, and there are even quite a few late divine kings experts. If this woman provokes a group of late divine kings experts, we'll be in trouble with our current strength. Don't worry, she won't dare to do anything, unless she wants the Yun family to never have a day of peace." "Let's go up," said Jianqin. His voice was rather cold. With that, he directly made his way to the 7th floor. The number of people on the 7th floor gradually increased. Most of the overgods who had entered the Tsang Poseidon Palace this time were gathered on this floor. There were a few divine kings among them, but they were all early divine kings. This formation is just too powerful. Just the pulses of energy it gives off are enough to make people shiver in fear. A primordial realm expert. This formation must contain the legacies of a primordial realm expert. Just when Jianqin and the others arrived on the 7th floor, a hubbub rang out from nearby. A large group of people had gathered several hundred meters away from them. They surrounded a formation as they pointed and discussed. Many people's eyes burned with desire. However, none of them attacked the formation. Quite a lot of blood splattered around the formation. Hee, I never thought I'd come across a primordial realm expert's legacy as soon as I got here. Let me get through this formation. At this moment, a burly, bare-chested man flew over from afar as he laughed aloud. He gave off the presence of an early divine king, forcing the surrounding overgods to avoid him. Boom! The burly man directly struck out. He swung his hammer as hard as he could towards the formation. However, as soon as the man's hammer struck the formation, all the power in his strike was reflected back by the formation without weakening at all. It landed on the man, causing him to vomit blood on the spot as he was blown away. There really are some stubborn people. The Azure Poseidon Palace has been opened so many times. Who knows how many people have seen this legacy in such a conspicuous location, yet no one has taken it away even now. Doesn't this clearly mean that the legacy won't be easy to obtain? Let alone an early divine king like you. Even some experts on the divine king's throne wouldn't dare to attack the formation directly, said a woman in black. The one who spoke was a woman in black. She looked at the heavily injured man, and a mocking smile appeared on her face. That formation is so powerful. Master Qianlong stared at the formation from several hundred meters away as he said sternly. Yunqin could not help but look at the formation as well, but she lost interest very soon. She stared at the hammer-wielding man and said loudly, "This sister is right. You blockhead. How can you not see through something so simple? What kind of brain do you have? How can you be so stupid? I really don't know how someone as stupid as you managed to reach the level of the Divine King." Yunqin lowered her head in thought when she reached there. She said doubtfully, "Is it really so easy for the current Divine King to break through? Otherwise, how can someone as stupid as him reach the level of the Divine King?" The burly man could accept being mocked by the woman in black. After all, she was a Divine King as well. He obviously did not want to get into a conflict with her when he was injured, not to mention that her words were not too harsh. However, now that he had been humiliated by a mere overgod and insulted so harshly, how could he, a mighty divine king, just swallow this anger? "You're looking to die." The burly man's face paled in anger. A vicious light shone from his eyes as he directly swung his hammer at Yunqin. Yunqin had already hidden behind Jianqin, Gu Hai, and Heiyu before the burly man had even struck out. She stared at Jianqin's group with schadenfreude. She knew that the burly man could not do anything to them with the strength that Jianqin had displayed and Qianlong, who had just reached the level of Divine King, but she could still cause them some trouble at the very least. Early Divine King is only the beginning. Once we reach the 8th and 9th floors, we'll encounter Mid-Divine King. I'd like to see how you deal with them. Humph, it's not that easy to be my guard, Yunqin thought. She was very biased against Jianqin, Heiyu, and Heiyu. Jianqin glanced at Yunqin, who had already hidden behind the burly man, and a sliver of coldness appeared in his eyes. Afterwards, he took a step forward and directly sent a palm strike towards the burly man's hammer. With a thud, powerful ripples of energy shot out in all directions with the scattered strands of sword qi, forcing the surrounding experts to retreat. Jianqin stopped the burly man's hammer with a single hand as he remained as still as a mountain. He stared at the burly man with shining eyes and said calmly, "This is young Miss Yunqin from the Yun family of the Sky Empire of the southern region of the profound Thunder Plain. Please forgive her for her rudeness." With that, Jianqin's arm suddenly shuddered and powerful chaotic force surged out with the power of the laws of the sword. Immediately, a force that the burly man found difficult to resist erupted, forcing him and his hammer to take several steps back. At the same time, Master Qianlong's presence leaked out slightly, completely revealing the presence of an early Divine King. The burly man glanced at Yunqin and Jianqin's group viciously. He gritted his teeth and said, "The Yun family of the Sky Empire of the southern region of the profound Thunder Plain. I'll remember that." Humph. With that, he turned around and left. Chapter 2037. Yun Exen pointed at Jianqin. She was so angry that she could not say anything else. Originally, she wanted to make some trouble for Jianqin's trio so that they would have a hard time in Poseidon Palace. It would be best if they made enemies everywhere. However, she had never thought that a simple sentence from Jianqin would point the spear towards her clan. In the end, not only did she fail to get what she wanted, but she even made an enemy for the Yun family. Although the Yun family did not fear a single Divine King with their strength and status, the Divine King was no weakling in the Saints' world. Even the Yun family that possessed an infinite prime would not want to provoke someone like that so easily. This was without considering his background. If they provoked a Divine King who possessed a great background, it would definitely be a disaster for the Yun family. After quite a while, Yun Exen yelled at Jianqin, "Jianqin, who allowed you to reveal my origins? Our Yun family gave you 3 spots. Is this how you repay our Yun family? Do you want me to report this to the Great Elder once I get out?" Jianqin frowned. Just when he wanted to say something, Kea said coldly, "Miss Yun Exen, didn't you completely look down on the Divine King? Why are you so afraid now? Since you're so afraid of others knowing your origins, it's best if you know your place. With our strength, we're all weaklings in Poseidon Palace. You're even weaker than the 3 of us. If you don't know how to keep a low profile, you'll cause great trouble for your Yun family even if you don't die in Poseidon Palace. You might even lead the Yun family to destruction. Perhaps you should rejoice that you've only provoked an early Divine King. I heard that every time the Azure Poseidon Palace opens, a Supreme Divine King from the Divine King will enter. If you accidentally provoke a Supreme Divine King, you should know the consequences." Yun Exen's face darkened and paled. She snorted coldly, "Just be good guards. It's not up to you to tell me what to do." Yun Exen no longer paid any attention to Jianqin, Kea, and Kea. She looked at the formation nearby that was extremely likely to hide a primordial realm expert's legacy. The light in her eyes burned with desire. Although she did not know what kind of legacy it was left behind by a primordial realm expert, after all. No matter what kind of legacy it was, and whether it suited her or not, it was enough to tempt many Divine Kings let alone over gods. Jianqin, Kea, and Qianlong studied the formation as well. Jianqin asked secretly, "Qianlong, are you confident in getting through this formation?" Master Qianlong frowned. He said sternly, "This formation was left behind by a primordial realm expert, and the primordial realm expert's mastery over formations is rather impressive. Although it's possible to get through it, it'll take quite a lot of time." Master Qianlong paused. After a moment of hesitation, he continued, "The operation of any formation cannot be separated from the support of energy. Although this formation will constantly absorb energy from Poseidon's palace as it operates, there will always be a limit to how fast it can absorb energy. When I broke through to Divine King, I grasped a new formation. It's called the Heavens Blockade. If it's used to the limit, it can split the world. The Heavens Blockade formation is extremely profound. Although I can't cast down the Heavens Blockade formation with my current cultivation, it can cut off origin energy from anywhere. Even in the Neptunian Divine Palace, the formation is still effective," Jianqin thought. "If I cast down the Heavens Blockade formation around this formation, I can stop it from absorbing energy from Poseidon's palace. Once it runs out of energy, it'll collapse by itself. However, many formations have divine crystals as backup energy, so I can't be certain whether the formation cast down by the primordial realm expert has a divine crystal or not. If there is, even if I cut off the connection between the formation and the Neptunian Divine Palace, I probably won't be able to get through the formation in the next 10 years after the Neptunian Divine Palace opens. Qianlong, why don't you try it first? What if the primordial realm formation doesn't have backup energy?" Kea said, "All right, I'll try it first." Master Qianlong nodded before arriving before the formation. He unleashed his Divine King's presence without holding back at all. He clasped his hands at everyone. "Everyone, if you only stare at the formation, it definitely won't open by itself. If you want to obtain the legacy inside, you'll have to find a way to get through it." Everyone rolled their eyes when they heard Qianlong's words. They all understood that, but who had the ability to get through it? "Hee, you make it sound nice. This formation was left behind by a primordial realm expert, after all. You've just witnessed its power. Getting through it is easier said than done." The woman in black giggled. Qianlong clasped his fist and said, "Since you're unwilling to get through it, why don't we let Old Man try? Please back up a little. Old Man wants to cast down a formation to get through it." "Ha ha ha, all right. I'd like to see how you get through it." A middle-aged man chuckled and immediately backed up far away. He was also a Divine King. The black-clothed woman hesitated for a moment, then took the initiative to retreat a distance away. Even the few Divine Kings gathered here had backed away, so it went without saying for the other over-gods. They all backed up far away, leaving behind a large empty space for Qianlong. Master Qianlong immediately began to cast down the formation. He tossed out various divine crystals and formation banners. What proficiency! He's actually a formations master. The Divine Kings gathered here were all surprised when they saw Qianlong cast down the formation. Even though they were not skilled in formations, they could tell that Qianlong's mastery over them was extremely great. "Humph, you're overestimating yourself. This formation was created by a primordial realm expert. You can dream on if an early Divine King like you wants to get through it." As all the overgods watched Qianlong cast down the formation, only Yunqin curled her lips in disdain. Qianlong cast down the formation extremely quickly. In less than 2 hours, he had cast down several formations. The connection between the primordial realm expert and the Azure Poseidon Palace had been severed by Qianlong's Heavens Blockade formation, cutting off its energy supply. Afterwards, powerful killing formations began to erupt with terrifying might. They produced dense strands of sword chi that constantly attacked the primordial realm formation. The sword chi was not the power of the laws of the sword. Instead, it was condensed from pure energy. It possessed the might of formations. The sword Qi did not attack randomly. Instead, they only attacked a single point, which was the core of the primordial realm formation. Even though the core of the formation would change at all times, Qianlong would be able to find it whenever it changed. The primordial realm formation could reflect all attacks, and the sword Qi was no exception. However, as soon as the sword Qi was reflected, it was blocked by Qianlong's defensive formation, so it failed to injure anyone present. What a powerful formation! If an early Divine King falls into it, he'll definitely die. Even a mid-Divine King will struggle to escape. The eyes of the nearby Divine Kings all narrowed as they were secretly shocked. Only Jianqin and Kea knew that Master Qianlong's formations were far more powerful than this, as all the formations he cast down would evolve and become more and more powerful. Combined, 9 swords split space. After attacking for 2 hours, Qianlong called out, and the sword Qi from the formation condensed in the air, landing on the primordial realm formation as 9 huge strands of sword Qi. 9 swords as one. Qianlong formed a seal with both hands, and the formation changed once again. He fused the power of his cultivation into the formation, and even the azure disc in his hand expanded to 10 meters in length, hovering above his head. Mysterious and profound inscriptions appeared, resonating with the formation from afar, making it even more powerful. The 9 strands of sword Qi fused together in a single instance, erupting with even greater power. Even mid-Divine King would shiver before it. Boom! 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 After just a few attacks, the powerful formation cast down by a primordial realm expert finally dimmed, gradually vanishing. Naturally, Qianlong did not destroy the primordial realm formation. Instead, he constantly attacked the core of the formation, exhausting all its energy. Without any replenishment, it collapsed on its own. With the disappearance of the formation, the scene inside was naturally exposed. A skeleton sat on the ground all by itself. It did not give off any pressure at all, seeming extremely ordinary. Only the dull, golden bead in its skull showed that it was a primordial realm expert when it was still alive. This was because the bead was condensed from the power of laws. It was known as a golden core of laws in the saints' world, and it was the symbol of a primordial realm expert. How is this possible? The formation has been destroyed, just like that? This is too unreal. Don't tell me that the Divine King's powerful formation has been destroyed in just a few hours? Everyone was extremely stunned. Disbelief filled their faces. The formation had remained unscathed for so many years, which was more than enough to demonstrate just how troublesome it was. They had never thought that it would be destroyed so easily today, which made them all feel rather unreal. However, the gazes of the crowd immediately froze, revealing an intense, burning, and greedy expression. There was also great surprise and excitement mixed within. No one was amazed by Qianlong's destruction of the primordial realm formation anymore. At that moment, everyone stared at the skeleton, or more accurately, they stared at the space ring on the skeleton's finger. With a single movement, Qianlong entered the formation and arrived before the primordial realm skeleton in a flash. Chapter 2038. This was a space ring left behind by a dead primordial realm expert. Without even thinking about it, it was obvious that the primordial realm expert's wealth was stored in there. It might even contain the primordial realm expert's legacy. The legacy of an infinite prime might not have been able to attract people from large organizations with great backgrounds, but it was fatally tempting to independent divine kings or divine kings from smaller places or organizations. As a result, when Qianlong got through the formations and everyone discovered the space ring on the skeleton's hand, the divine kings who were still gathered there, all charged over with burning desire and greed. If Qianlong were a late divine king, they would not have dared to steal the space ring from him, no matter how much they desired it. However, Qianlong was only an early divine king. There were not a lot of divine kings on the 7th floor of Poseidon Palace in the first place. Aside from Qianlong, there were only 5 divine kings who remained nearby. Among the 5 of them, other than the middle-aged man who called himself king, the other 4 rushed towards the skeleton as fast as they could. However, all of them had been blinded by the appearance of the primordial realm's legacy. They failed to realize that the various formations Qianlong had cast down were still present. The divine king at the very front immediately fell into a killing formation. The killing formation that had already undergone 2 transformations immediately began to operate, producing a huge strand of sword qi. After Qianlong had broken through to the divine king realm, all the formations he cast down became much more powerful, let alone a formation that had undergone many transformations. As a result, when the divine king faced the huge strand of sword qi, he was unable to use it at all despite his impressive cultivation. His entire body was cleaved in half by the sword qi, and even his soul failed to avoid it. His soul was wiped out. The appearance of the divine king made the other 3 divine kings who charged towards Qianlong come to a halt. They stared at the bisected divine king in shock as they became even more fearful of Qianlong's formations. Even the divine king had been slain in a single strike when he was trapped in the formation earlier. This was more than enough to demonstrate the power of the killing formation. Qianlong was extremely confident in his formations. He paid no attention to what was happening outside. All of his attention was focused on the skeleton of the primordial realm expert. He bowed deeply towards the skeleton, first before bending down and removing the primordial realm expert's space ring. When his hand came into contact with the spatial ring, the skeleton silently turned into a pile of ashes. Although the essence of a primordial realm expert's corpse could maintain its state for thousands of years, the primordial realm expert had been slain by the Grand Monarch of Samsara. However, the primordial realm expert had been slain by the samsaric immortal exalt, one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortal's world, using the power of samsara. The power of samsara had already corroded his bones, so they were reduced to dust with a single touch. Master Qianlong sighed inside when he saw this. Even in the entire saints' world, primordial realm experts were important figures. They possessed esteemed statuses. However, the primordial realm expert before him had actually been reduced to such a state. Even his skeleton had been destroyed after his death. It was truly a pity. Master Qianlong slowly picked up the space ring. He did not even look at what was inside, directly stowing it away before leaving the formation. The other divine kings were stunned when they saw Master Qianlong leave the formation. Originally, they thought Qianlong would use the formation to fend them off, but they had never thought he would leave without any hesitation at all. Did he not know that without the protection of the formation, he would directly face the combined attacks of several divine kings? The light in the eyes of the divine kings flickered. They hesitated when they saw how fearless Qianlong was. However, in the end, the 3 of them were unable to resist the great temptation of a primordial realm expert's legacy. With a flash, they surrounded Qianlong in a triangle. Just when the 3 of them were about to speak, sharp sword qi and the power of the laws of destruction appeared. Jianqin and Kea had struck out. A snow-white streak of light, several meters long, shot out from Jianqin's right hand. It seemed like his entire right arm had become a sword, stabbing towards one of the divine kings aggressively. Kea's hand contained the power of the laws of destruction as he attacked the second divine king who had surrounded Qianlong. Mere overgods dare to attack us? Even if there's a supreme overgod among you, you're still ants in our eyes, the 2 divine kings sneered. Killing intent flickered through the eyes of the 2 divine kings. One of them wielded a spear, while the other wielded 2 swords. They struck out with the power of the laws of the divine kings. Immediately, divine might surged as surging energy shook up the surroundings. The moment the divine king stabbed out with his spear, it turned into an extremely thin streak of light. It immediately pierced through space and arrived before Jianqin. The spear-wielding Divine King had naturally seen how Jianqin had repelled the hammer-wielding Divine King, who had been humiliated by Yunqin with a single palm strike. However, he still did not take Jianqin seriously. This was because the hammer-wielding man was injured in the first place, so his strength had been drastically reduced. Coupled with the fact that he had underestimated his opponent, it made sense for him to be repelled by an overgod. As a result, in the eyes of the spear-wielding Divine King, Jianqin was only a supreme overgod who had made it onto the overgod's plaque. As long as he did not come across an overgod who ranked in the top 10, he would not take him seriously. As for the overgods who ranked in the top 10, the spear-wielding God King knew every single one of them. The person before him was definitely not one of them. However, when his spear collided with Jianqin's sword qi, the spear-wielding Divine King discovered in shock that he was unable to gain the upper hand at all in a direct clash with the Divine King. What is this energy? The spear-wielding Divine King was secretly surprised. Jianqin's strength did not come from the laws of the sword. Even though the laws of the sword were much more powerful than the laws that the spear-wielding Divine King had comprehended, he could make up for it with his cultivation that surpassed Jianqin's. The true crux of the matter was the chaotic force that Jianqin practiced. Jianqin's presence skyrocketed as he radiated with surging sword qi. The light in his right hand expanded once again, going from 3 meters to 6. The sword qi was as resplendent as the stars as it stabbed into the spear-wielding Divine King's chest. Spurt! The Divine King immediately vomited blood. He was extremely shocked. Before Jianqin could attack his soul with the sword qi, he immediately retreated, moving several hundred meters away in a single instance. At the same time, Kea engaged in an intense battle with the sword-wielding Divine King. In terms of battle prowess, Kea did not lose to Jianqin at all. As a matter of fact, her usage of the laws had already reached perfection, leaving Jianqin in the dust. As a result, her battle with the sword-wielding Divine King also ended in just a few moves. Kea struck the Divine King's back with a palm strike, sending him flying backwards with blood spurting out of his mouth. What a terrifying overgod! The only Divine King who had not charged up personally witnessed this from nearby. He immediately gasped. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 3 Divine Kings that surrounded Qianlong were injured. Only the black-clothed woman remained. However, at this moment, the woman's eyes widened as she stared at this dramatic scene in disbelief. She felt rather dazed. Chapter 2039. 2 late overgods had actually defeated 2 early Divine King in an open battle, and they had achieved victory with an overwhelming advantage. Just how shocking was this result? At that moment, the surroundings fell completely silent, whether it was the Divine King present or the overgods in the surroundings. They all stared at Jianqin and Kea in shock. Who are you? The spear-wielding Divine King, who had been injured by Jianqin, stared at Jianqin in fear. His voice trembled slightly. Only by clashing with Jianqin personally could he truly sense Jianqin's strength. The spear-wielding Divine King understood that it would not take much effort for Jianqin to kill him with the strength that Jianqin had displayed. However, he struggled to believe that there was actually such a powerful overgod. He had never clashed with the supreme overgod who ranked first on the overgod's plaque, so he did not know just how powerful Emochang was. However, he was certain that not only was Jianqin no weaker than Emochang, but he was even slightly more powerful. Jianqin ignored the spear-wielding Divine King. He looked at the rather stunned woman in black and asked, "Ma, do you still want to continue fighting over the primordial realm expert's space ring?" The woman could not help but shiver inside when she met Jianqin's sharp gaze. She also possessed the strength of an early Divine King. Her gaze towards Jianqin became filled with some rarely seen fear. "I am Yiwei. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Your strength has truly broadened my horizons. The primordial realm expert space ring is protected by 2 supreme overgods and a formation master. There really isn't anyone who dares to lay their hands on it on the 7th floor. Yi Wei will be taking her leave first. The woman clasped her hands at Jianqin and Kea before leaving without looking back. There were quite a few divine kings who had entered the Poseidon Palace, but some of the more powerful ones had already reached the very top. Not only were there extremely few divine kings who remained on the 7th floor, but they were basically all early divine king. As a result, there really was no one who possessed the strength to fight over the primordial realm experts' space ring on the 7th floor now that it had ended up in Qianlong's hands. As for the overgods, they did not even dare to think about it. Master Qianlong took out the space ring and arrived before Yun Xian step by step. He placed the space ring before Yun Xian and said slowly with his old voice, "You must have seen the origins of this space ring with your own eyes." Old Man personally removed it from the remains of a primordial realm expert. The old man did not take a look at what was inside. Yun Xian stared at Master Qianlong in a rather stupefied manner. She was extremely shocked. Not only was she shocked that Master Qianlong was able to get through the formation that had rendered all the late Divine King and even the experts on the Divine King's throne helpless, but she was also shocked by Jianqin and Kea's strength. She had heard that Jianqin and Kea were both supreme overgods before, but Yun Xian had thought that they were supreme overgods who did not rank particularly high on the overgods plaque, so she did not take them seriously. However, she had never thought that Jianqin and Kea would be so powerful, where they could defeat early Divine King in a crushing manner. Yun Xian was so shocked by this outcome that she still had yet to return to her senses. She did not even know whether she had heard what Master Qianlong had said to her. "Master," Qianlong continued, "there's probably a primordial realm expert's legacy in this space ring. Old Man will give you 2 choices right now. First, you can take the space ring and leave the cerulean Poseidon Palace, and the 3 of us will complete our agreement with your Yun family. From then on, we will have nothing to do with your Yun family. Second, you can give up on the primordial realm's legacy and continue to stay in the cerulean Poseidon Palace. We will protect you for the remaining year of the agreement. However, we might not be able to obtain a second primordial realm's legacy during that year." Master Qianlong stared at Yun Xian with shining eyes. "Miss Yun Xian, may I ask what your choice is?" Jianqin and Kea stared at Yun Xian as well. With Yun Xian beside them, they would not be able to do many things freely. For example, when they fought against the 2 Divine King earlier, the 2 of them did not dare to place all their attention on their opponents. They needed to pay some attention to Yun Xian to prevent anything from happening to her. As a result, they naturally hoped that Yun Xian would leave. Yun Xian returned to her senses. She suppressed her shock as she carefully thought about what Master Qianlong had said. She stared at the space ring on Qianlong's finger as the light in her eyes flickered. She was conflicted inside. She had come to the cerulean Poseidon Palace to train but to play. She had come to see what the cerulean Poseidon Palace that could attract so many large organizations in the saints' world was like. Therefore, in her heart, she had never thought of moving the inheritance inside. This was because the cerulean Poseidon Palace had been opened so many times already. Everything that could be taken away had been taken away long ago. What remained were legacies that many divine kings struggled to obtain even after trying various methods. As an overgod, it was impossible for her to contend against the divine kings. However, when Master Qianlong placed a space ring before her, Yun Xian felt extremely surprised. She also found it rather unreal. "Humph, you want to chase me away? I won't let you have your way," Yun Xian suddenly said. When she said that, she had deviated from Yun Xian's original intentions. She desired the space ring very much because it belonged to a primordial realm expert of the Taoist sect of Neptunia. It might contain everything about the primordial realm expert. If she obtained the space ring, it would hold extremely great significance to the Yun family. However, she turned it down in the end for some reason. "Let's go," Jianqin sighed gently. He was rather disappointed. Miss Yun Xian, I hope you can behave yourself from now on. Kea glared at Yun Xian as he threatened her. Yun Xian blinked. This time, she surprisingly remained silent. Afterwards, they continued on their way. However, after what had happened, Yun Xian became obedient. Not only was she no longer the center of attention, but she would even hand the decision to Genshin and the others at times. As a matter of fact, Yun Xian even asked Genshin and the others which path they should take when they arrived at a fork in the road. This was impossible when they had just entered the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. However, whenever Genshin and the others suggested something or decided on something, Yun Xian would completely support it. She seemed to completely follow Genshin and the others. The change in Yun Xian's attitude left Genshin and the others in disbelief. They felt like she had become a completely different person, where they almost failed to recognize her. However, the three of them understood that this was all because of their strength. If they did not display extraordinary strength and continued to treat Yun Xian as ordinary people, Yun Xian's attitude would not have changed at all. Very soon, they arrived on the 8th floor of the Cerulean Poseidon Palace. What entered their eyes was a world formed from endless volcanoes. The entire world was bright red, and the terrifying heat caused the space there to distort. These volcanoes were not regular volcanoes. Instead, they had been modified by the primordial realm experts of the Taoist sect of Neptunia through great abilities. The flames were extremely terrifying. Every single speck of sparkle would pose a fatal threat to overgods.